Chapter 885. Within the Worldwide Academy. Within the study, Qin Tian looked at the ancient book in his hands quietly. Every day he would take some time out to read. This was what the Prophet had requested of them, and after so many years he had gotten used to it. As though he thought of something, Qin Tian put down the book in his hands and looked ahead. Is there any news of Yi Xian? Where Qin Tian's gaze landed, an old man appeared like a specter. The old man wore a loose robe, his hands hidden in his sleeves, and he exuded a chilling aura. The old man shook his head. There is no news of Chen Yiming at the moment. However, since he has agreed to appear, it should not be a problem. Chen Yiming, one of the 6 headmasters of the Worldwide Academy. Qin Tian asked softly, what about the other 5? The old man replied solemnly, the other 5 did not respond to us. However, if there comes a day when the academy faces a life-and-death situation, I believe that they and the headmaster will appear. Qin Tian shook his head and laughed. Elder Yu Shuang, do you think that it's because I'm the academy master that they are not returning? The old man called Yu Shuang shook his head. You have your reasons, but it is not entirely your fault. After teacher disappeared, most of them went to look for him. To them, the academy with teacher is their academy. This is also the reason why they did not come out to fight for the position. However, some of them left because of you. After all, after you took over, everything you did was different from when teacher was still around. Qin Tian said in a light voice, all those years ago, teacher established the Myriad Dimension Academy with the intention of enlightening all living beings. The academy doesn't select people based on natural talent or background. So long as one is willing to learn, then anyone can enter my Myriad Dimension Academy. Even those students that represent a power are able to enter my Myriad Dimension Academy. But sir didn't think that after these people finished their studies in the Worldwide Academy, they wouldn't be used by the Worldwide Academy at all. Yu Shuang said, although these people are not used by my Worldwide Academy still has students all over the 5 dimensions. Who would dare to bully my Worldwide Academy? Qin Tian looked at Yu Shuang. That is because teacher is here. With teacher around, the multidimensional universe has order. Who dares to bully my Worldwide Academy? But teacher is no longer here. Yu Shuang was silent. Actually, he also knew that when the Prophet was around, the Prophet could do whatever he wanted. Because the Prophet was powerful, no one dared to bully the Worldwide Academy. However, now that the Prophet had disappeared, there was no one in the Worldwide Academy who could control the 5-dimensional universe. Even if she was a female teacher, she could only protect the Worldwide Academy at most. It was impossible for her to manage other forces. Therefore, after the Prophet disappeared, many of the policies that he left behind could no longer be implemented. This was because the Worldwide Academy was no longer the leader. They would no longer listen to the Worldwide Academy. At this time Yu Shuang sighed, actually it wasn't easy for you. At that time the experts of the Worldwide Academy had all left and disappeared. When Qin Tian took over he was only at the Yin-Yang realm. At that time if not for the Prophet's influence, the Worldwide Academy would have been long gone. Although many forces were still afraid of the Worldwide Academy, in their hearts they no longer revere this place. As if thinking of something Yu Shuang said, however there is one thing that you did that was very unwise. It was that Yi Xian. Because of this person many of our people have died. Qin Tian was silent. Yu Shuang continued. Presently, my Myriad Dimension Academy has entered into conflict with the Talisman sect. It can be said that since we've been targeting Yi Xian, we haven't obtained the slightest benefit, and we've suffered incessant deaths instead. Furthermore, our Worldwide Academy has become like a secular power fighting for power. This has gone against Mr.'s original intentions. Qin Tian spoke softly, we have no way out. That Yi Xian has gained the recognition of the World Prison Pagoda. We are fated to fight to the death with him, unless we are willing to hand over the Universal Library to him. As for him, Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue? From now on Yi Xian's position as the prince shall be removed, and Yi Lang shall take over. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the Yi clan's elders. What? Right at this time, a timid voice rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yi Ling and was Yi Xian's sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The girl called Yi Ling bowed to everyone in the ancestral hall, and asked timidly, Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason? The Great Elder looked coldly at Yi Ling. This is a clan matter, what are you butting in for? Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the Great Elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family, and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince. Impudent. The Great Elder suddenly raged, whether he's stripped or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men drag her away. At this time the new prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. He should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The Great Elder replied coldly, then flog him 30 times. Very quickly 2 Yi clan's guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years and even now he's fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, Young Master Yi Lang inherits the title of prince. What are you yelling about? As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly swelled up. However, she did not cry and only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled, What's your name? The guard quickly bowed. This subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince. Yi Lang nodded, You're not bad. After I become the prince I'll need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and quickly bowed deeply. This subordinate will go through fire and water for the prince and I'll do anything for you. Yi Lang nodded, Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Don't hold back, understand? Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something and he suddenly stopped. Inside the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside the hall. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe, and the robe was tattered, and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a cold smile. In the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The Great Elder narrowed his eyes and his face was dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this moment, Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Puh. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. Yi Lang did not stop there and charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time Yi Lang suddenly roared, Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Puh. Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, Your man? As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, Prince, save me. Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, tears welled up in her eyes. Brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue? From now on Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides there were the elders of the Yi clan. What? Right at this moment, a slightly timid voice suddenly resounded within the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that Yi Xian was to be replaced, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the hall and asked timidly, "Great elder, my brother Yi Xian is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason?" The great elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. "This is a matter of the clan, what are you interrupting for?" Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the great elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, "Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family, and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince. This is truly unfair. Impudent." The great elder suddenly raged. "Whether or not he's crippled, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this time, the new prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. "He should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others." The great elder replied coldly, "Then flog him 30 times. Very quickly 2 Yi clan guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years and even now he's fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, "Young master Yi Lang inherits the title of prince. What are you shouting for?" As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly swelled up. But she did not cry and only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard quickly bowed. "This subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the prince I'll need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and quickly bowed deeply. "This subordinate is willing to go through fire and water for the prince, even if it means death." Yi Lang nodded. "Drag him away. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Don't hold back, understand?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu suddenly stopped as if he had seen something. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe, and the robe was tattered, and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a cold smile. In the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes and his face was dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this moment, Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. Yi Lang did not stop there and charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you?" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Chapter 886. Yi Ling let go of Qin Tian and looked to her right. A middle-aged man stood there. He wore a gray robe, held an ancient scroll in his left hand, and held a long brush in his right. He seemed extremely refined and quiet. "The sect master of calligraphy," someone exclaimed with shock. The sect master of calligraphy's original name was Lin Xiaoshu, and he was one of the 6 original sect masters. He was a top-rate expert of the Worldwide Academy all those years ago. The members of the Worldwide Academy instantly heaved sighs of relief when they saw this person. The current Worldwide Academy wasn't the Worldwide Academy of all those years ago. Even if the Prophet hadn't been there all those years ago, the Shura Empress wouldn't have been able to act so wantonly in the Worldwide Academy. After all, besides the Prophet there were also countless other experts. Unfortunately, the experts of the Myriad Dimension Academy that could make a move were very few, and it was utterly impossible for these few people to go against the Azura Empress. Fortunately, there was a headmaster who had come. Yi Ling gazed at Lin Xiaoshu, and the latter glanced at the surroundings before he chuckled. "Empress, may I know how my Worldwide Academy has offended you to make you so angry?" Yi Ling didn't say anything and she just flicked her sleeve. Lin Xiaoshu suddenly tapped lightly with his brush in the air. Bang! An invisible wave suddenly rippled out in front of them. In the next moment, everyone watched as Lin Xiaoshu retreated repeatedly, and he only stopped after moving almost 3 kilometers back. However, the Shura Empress hadn't moved even half a step. The expressions of the countless experts of the Worldwide Academy instantly fell when they witnessed this scene. The sect master of calligraphy glanced at the brush in his hand, and it had completely cracked open. The sect master of calligraphy gazed at the Shura in the distance. "Empress, do you really intend to destroy my Worldwide Academy?" Lin Xiaoshu's face was expressionless as she walked slowly towards the sect master of calligraphy. "Wasn't I wanted by the Worldwide Academy?" Venerable calligrapher looked at Qin Tian, who was not far away, and asked, "What happened?" Qin Tian said in a deep voice, "We are after Yi Xian's younger sister, but we didn't expect Yi Ling to look so similar to the Empress." Reverend Calligraphy frowned slightly. "Put a warrant for Yi Xian's sister?" "What?" Qin Tian was silent. At this moment Yi Ling suddenly said, "He definitely wants to use his sister to threaten her, right?" Speaking up to this point, her expression suddenly became ferocious. Because at this moment she thought of many things. In the lower realms she'd been used to threaten that young man on more than one occasion, and that young man had almost died many times for her sake. When she thought up to here, a strand of indescribable flames of rage suddenly arose in Yi Ling's heart. In the next moment she suddenly flipped her palm. Boom. At this moment, dozens of academies in the surroundings were directly reduced to ashes. Seeing this scene, Lin Xiaoshu and Qin Tian's expressions immediately sank. If this Shura Empress didn't give up, it would be a disaster for the Worldwide Academy. Currently, the only person in the Worldwide Academy who could face this Empress head-on was the female teacher. However, they didn't know where the female teacher was. In the distance, Yi Ling looked around coldly. Finally, her gaze fell on Qin Tian. "Those who used to be in the Worldwide Academy can all be called outstanding people, but you've done such a despicable thing. You've really disgraced the ancestors of the Worldwide Academy." As she spoke, she suddenly clenched her right hand. Boom. In an instant, a powerful force gathered in the area. At the same time, the sky above the Myriad Dimensions Academy suddenly darkened. Countless black clouds gathered, and within those black clouds, countless evil spirits roared. Seeing this scene, all the experts of the Worldwide Academy were shocked. This was the destruction of the Worldwide Academy. Qin Tian's face was full of fear. What had he done? Wasn't he looking for Yi Ling? Why did he find a killing god? "Empress, please show mercy." At this moment, a voice suddenly came from afar. Soon a man appeared not far from Yi Ling. The man wore a blue robe, had long hair, and held a black flute in his hand. Lu Shidi. Some of the experts of the Worldwide Academy immediately recognized the man's identity. This man was one of the former 6 headmasters of the Worldwide Academy. Lu Shidi looked at the angry Yi Ling and quickly cupped his fists. "Empress, this is the fault of the Worldwide Academy. Please show mercy." Yi Ling looked at Lu Shidi without saying a word. The force around them was getting stronger and stronger. Lu Shidi said in a low voice, "Empress, please give face to my teacher." "Prophet." Yi Ling frowned slightly. She didn't make a move, but the force around them didn't disappear either. Lu Shidi said again, "Empress, my teacher founded the Worldwide Academy for the sake of the 5 dimensions in the world. Although it isn't as good as it used to be, it shouldn't be destroyed just like that. Please give face to my teacher and show mercy." Yi Ling was silent. Lu Shidi and the others were also silent. They knew that whether or not the Worldwide Academy would be spared depended on Yi Ling's decision. Of course, the Worldwide Academy wasn't completely defenseless. However, they didn't want to fight to the death. Because once that happened, even if the Worldwide Academy could stop the Empress, it could be said that it would suffer a great deal of damage. At this moment Yi Ling suddenly looked up. Above the clouds in the sky, the space there trembled slightly. She frowned slightly and the next moment she disappeared. Seeing the Empress disappear, Everyone present heaved a sigh of relief. This Empress of the Shura was really too terrifying. Lu Shidi looked up at the sky and said softly, "Someone has made a move." Lin Xiaoshu asked, "Is it her?" Lu Shidi shook his head, "I didn't sense her aura." Lin Xiaoshu was silent. At this moment, Lu Shidi suddenly looked around and said softly, "Today is a humiliation for the Worldwide Academy." Humiliation. Hearing this, everyone present was silent. Today the Worldwide Academy was almost destroyed by the Empress of the Shura alone. It could be said that this was indeed an extremely humiliating matter. After all, when the Prophet was still around, who would dare to act presumptuously in the Worldwide Academy? Who would dare? Even without the Prophet, the teacher, and the others, who would dare to bully the Worldwide Academy at that time? At this moment, Lin Xiaoshu suddenly looked at Qin Tian, who was in soul form nearby. "Why are you looking for Yi Ling?" Qin Tian was silent. Lu Shidi suddenly said, "Although this is a bit despicable, it is not entirely his fault. I have already investigated Yi Xian. He is not an ordinary person, especially the mysterious swordsman behind him. Her strength is definitely not weaker than ours, maybe even stronger. And Yi Xian's biggest weakness is that Yi Ling. If we can find Yi Ling, we can naturally subdue Yi Xian with a small price." Unfortunately, we did not expect that Yi Ling and the Empress of the Shura would look so similar, so much so that we have provoked the Empress. At this point he shook his head. It had to be said that this time, the Worldwide Academy's actions were very stupid. It could be said that outsiders would not sympathize with the Worldwide Academy, nor would they think that the Empress of the Shura was bullying others. They would only laugh at the Worldwide Academy for seeking death. Put out a warrant for the Empress of the Shura? Everyone knew that soon, the Worldwide Academy would become the joke of the entire fifth dimension. At this moment, Qin Tian suddenly said, "This matter is my fault." Lu Shidi looked at Qin Tian, "Of course it is your fault. From now on, you are no longer the Academy Master of the Worldwide Academy." At this point he paused and then said, "This matter has become so big and so stupid. If I do not punish you, it will be difficult to convince the public." Qin Tian was silent. Lu Shidi looked at Lin Xiaoshu, "You do it?" Lin Xiaoshu shook his head, "You know that I do not like to do these troublesome things. You do it?" Lu Shidi was silent. Lin Xiaoshu said again, "Someone has to bear the responsibility." Lu Shidi nodded, "Yes." After that, he turned to look at a certain place and said softly, "We must open the Worldwide Library. Only this treasure vault left behind by teacher is able to change the current situation of our Myriad Dimension Academy." Lin Xiaoshu said in a deep voice, "That World Prison Pagoda is in Yi Xian's hands and it has already recognized him as its master." Lu Shidi said softly, "Then take it back." Lin Xiaoshu looked at Lu Shidi. Lu Shidi smiled and said, "That World Prison Pagoda originally belongs to our Worldwide Academy. It is only right and proper for us to take it back, isn't it?" Lin Xiaoshu said in a deep voice, "He will not easily hand it over to us. Moreover, from what I know, that pagoda does not seem to be in his hands right now." Lu Shidi smiled, "That pagoda has already recognized him as its master. As long as he is willing, that pagoda can return to his hands at any time." Lin Xiaoshu was silent. Not far away, Qin Tian looked at Lu Shidi and Lin Xiaoshu. At this moment he suddenly understood. These people did not come back for the Worldwide Academy. Their real goal was the Worldwide Library. It was teacher's treasury. Thinking of this, Qin Tian shook his head and smiled. At this moment he remembered the words of the Prophet. The most unpredictable thing in the world is the human heart. The most volatile thing in the world is also the human heart. At this moment, Qin Tian suddenly felt disheartened. Without thinking much, Qin Tian turned and left. In the distance, Lin Xiaoshu looked at Qin Tian. Lu Shidi said softly, "This time he did such a stupid thing. Letting him live is already giving teacher face back then." After saying this he looked at Lin Xiaoshu, "Go inform all the experts of the Worldwide Academy outside. Tell them that our Worldwide Academy has reached a moment of life and death." Lin Xiaoshu frowned, "Will they come back?" Lu Shidi nodded, "They will. Because they won't just watch as the Myriad Dimension Academy declines." Lin Xiaoshu nodded and turned to leave. Lu Shidi turned and looked not far away. That was where the Worldwide Library was located. Inside there were treasures left behind by the Prophet. After a moment of silence, Lu Shidi turned and left. After the news of the Shura Empress being wanted by the Worldwide Academy, the entire Worldwide Academy became a laughing stock. The Shura Empress. It could be said that no one wanted to provoke the Shura Empress. Who didn't want to avoid this place? However, the Worldwide Academy actually wanted to arrest the Shura Empress. Wasn't they tired of living? Somewhere in the clouds, Yi Xian was currently fighting with the sword spirit woman. On his back, he carried a giant sword and in his hand was a light sword. When fighting with the sword spirit woman, when he used the light sword, his sword was like thunder and as fast as lightning. When he switched to the heavy sword, his style changed abruptly. Under his sword, it was as heavy as 1,000 caddies, splitting the heavens and splitting the earth. Chapter 887. After practicing for an unknown period of time, Yi Xian stopped. At this moment, his whole body was drenched in sweat. Tired? That was how he felt at the moment. Using a heavy sword and a light sword was too taxing on the mind. Especially a heavy sword. Switching to a heavy sword consumed a lot of energy, while a light sword consumed a lot of the soul because a light sword was a flying sword. At this moment, the sword spirit woman not far away suddenly said, "You've learned well." Yi Xian looked at the sword spirit woman. The sword spirit said, "But it's still not enough. You haven't switched fast enough. You have to switch fast enough, so fast that the other party can't even react when your sword has switched." Yi Xian nodded, "I understand. I will continue to work hard." The sword spirit nodded. She looked at the executing heaven sword at Yi Xian's waist. "Can I have a look at this sword?" Yi Xian nodded. He took down the executing heaven sword and handed it to the sword spirit. The sword spirit took the executing heaven sword. She gently stroked the sword and said softly, "Your sword is really sharp." Yi Xian smiled, "Miss Sword Spirit, as far as I know, you are also a sword, right?" The sword spirit looked at Yi Xian. "Yes." Yi Xian said, "Can I have a look at the sword spirit's real body?" The sword spirit shook her head slightly. "In terms of sharpness, I can't compare to your sword. In terms of realm, I can't compare to the sword that hurt me before." As she spoke, she handed the executing heaven sword to Yi Xian. "You have great luck. You have a sword that others can never have in their lifetime. You must cherish it." Yi Xian took the executing heaven sword and said, "There's another sword." With that, he took out the soul-suppressing sword. When she saw the soul-suppressing sword, a trace of surprise flashed in the sword spirit's eyes. "This sword's soul?" As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. "You're amazing. One sword is extremely sharp and the other sword can restrain the soul." Yi Xian smiled. "I'm lucky." The sword spirit nodded. "Both swords are very good. Treasure them well." As she spoke, she seemed to have thought of something. She looked at the soul-suppressing sword and said softly, "If you use this sword to perform Master Sword Soul skill, the power will not be ordinary." Yi Xian said seriously, "That's what I think too. However, can I cultivate Sword Soul skills now?" The sword spirit said, "There's no hurry. The most important thing for you now is to practice your sword rules well. You have to practice switching between the heavy sword and the light sword to the extreme. Moreover, you have to learn to switch at the right time and not switch at will. Also, you have to find the right time to use your immeasurable sword, and strive to kill when you strike. Understand?" Boundless sword. Yi Xian nodded. He hadn't grasped the timing of the boundless sword well. The boundless sword was a flying sword. After using the heart sword mantra, its speed was much faster than before. Moreover, the distance it could cover was also much greater. However, this sword strike had to be timed in order to kill in one strike. Opportunity. To put it simply, it required combat experience. The sword spirit looked at Lian Wanli. "If you too practice it, it will be very beneficial to you as well." The corners of Lian Wanli's mouth curled up slightly. "That's exactly what I was thinking." As soon as she finished speaking, she opened her palm, and the azure dragon saber suddenly appeared in her hand. She looked at Yi Xian and without any nonsense, she slashed the saber towards Yi Xian. The azure dragon roared as she swung the saber. In the distance, the corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly, and he directly vanished on the spot. A ray of sword light flashed across the field. Bang! An explosion suddenly resounded in the field. After the sword spirit glanced at the two of them, she turned to look outside. After a while she walked outside. In next to no time she arrived outside, and a middle-aged man stood not too far away from her. The middle-aged man had a saber hanging horizontally behind his waist. The middle-aged man glanced behind the sword spirit. "Where is this?" The sword spirit looked at the middle-aged man and asked in reply, "Who are you?" The middle-aged man said, "I'm here." This chapter is not finished, please continue to the next page. Chen Yiming. If there were outsiders here they would definitely be shocked. Chen Yiming was a famous saber cultivator in the 5th dimension. He was known as the Saber Monarch and he was also one of the 6 leaders of the Worldwide Academy. Unfortunately, the sword spirit in front of him did not recognize him. The sword spirit looked at Chen Yiming. This place does not welcome outsiders. Chen Yiming shook his head. The person I am looking for is inside. The sword spirit slightly frowned. Yi Xian? Chen Yiming nodded. It's him. The sword spirit suddenly disappeared, and a ray of sword light slashed towards Chen Yiming. In front of him, Chen Yiming lightly took a step back, and his body slightly leaned to the side, dodging the sword by a hair's breadth. However, at this moment, that ray of sword light suddenly slashed horizontally. The sound of air being torn suddenly resounded. But this sword slashed empty air. The sword spirit looked in front of him, and Chen Yiming had unknowingly retreated a few meters. The sword spirit looked at Chen Yiming and she suddenly disappeared. The space in front of Chen Yiming suddenly split open, and a ray of sword light appeared. Chen Yiming's face was expressionless. His right hand suddenly grabbed forward and then he squeezed. This squeeze directly caught a ray of sword light. The next moment he lightly exerted force with 2 fingers. Bang! The ray of sword light shattered, and a figure retreated explosively. It was the sword spirit. When the sword spirit stopped, she looked at Chen Yiming, and at this moment, there was a trace of seriousness in her eyes. This person in front of her had crushed her without even drawing his saber. She wasn't a match for him. Very strong. At this moment, Chen Yiming suddenly said, "You aren't the person I want to kill. Tell the Yi Xian to come out." The sword spirit was about to speak, but at this moment Yi Xian walked out from not too far away. When she saw Yi Xian, the sword spirit said in a low voice, "This person is very strong." Yi Xian nodded and he looked at the distant Chen Yiming. At this moment, Lian Chen's voice suddenly resounded in his mind, "It's the Saber Monarch. This person is extremely strong and you aren't a match for him." Not a match for him. Yi Xian's face sank. "Miss Lian Chen, this is too much of a blow to me." Lian Chen said in a low voice, "You really aren't a match for him." Yi Xian looked at Chen Yiming and said softly, "Even if I'm not a match for him, I still have to fight." Lian Chen was silent. At this moment, Chen Yiming looked at Yi Xian. He sized up Yi Xian and slightly nodded. No wonder Chen Tian was helpless. "Not bad. Come, draw your sword." Draw his sword. Yi Xian looked at Chen Yiming. He opened his palm and the book world appeared in his hand. At this moment, Chen Yiming suddenly said, "Don't use this." As soon as he finished speaking, his realm was directly suppressed to the universe realm. This realm was the same as Yi Xian's current realm, and even lower than Chen Tian's realm. Yi Xian was silent. The other party was very confident. At this moment, Lian Chen said, "Be careful." Yi Xian nodded and he looked at Chen Yiming. He suddenly disappeared and the next moment, a sword slashed at Chen Yiming. Chen Yiming took a step back with his right foot. This step was very slow as if he was taking a stroll. However, it was this step that allowed Yi Xian's sword to slash at thin air. Yi Xian's sword slashed at thin air, but he didn't stop. He leaped up, and the sword in his hand stabbed forward as fast as lightning. Opposite Yi Xian, Chen Yiming moved sideways, and Yi Xian's sword slashed at thin air again. However, at this moment Yi Xian's sword suddenly flew out. Immeasurable sword. With regards to this sword, Yi Xian was very confident, because the person in front of him was too arrogant. And the opponent's arrogance was his chance. Therefore, after 2 consecutive failures, he directly used immeasurable sword for the 3rd sword. However, he was dumbfounded when he unleashed the attack. Oh. This chapter is not finished, please continue to the next page. In the distance, Chen Yiming was still standing there holding a blade in his hand, and this blade was blocking a sword. It was blocked. Yi Xian looked at Chen Yiming. Although his expression was calm, his heart was in turmoil. Chen Yiming said softly, "Your sword is not bad. Whether it is the timing, speed or power, they are all top-notch." Yi Xian said, "You were sent by Chen Tian?" Chen Yiming shook his head. "He can't order me around, I came to find you myself." Yi Xian looked at Chen Yiming. "You are the one who wants to kill me." Chen Yiming nodded. "Come, continue to attack." Yi Xian nodded. "Okay." As his voice faded, he suddenly disappeared. In the distance, Chen Yiming unhurriedly placed the blade in his hand behind his back. At this moment, a ray of sword light appeared in front of his eyebrows, and he used his fingers to clamp it. He was very confident, because Yi Xian's sword speed wasn't enough to threaten him. However, at this moment, the sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly turned into a heavy sword, and he used 2 fingers to clamp this heavy sword. However, the strength of this sword was completely different. Bang! Chen Yiming instantly retreated several meters. After he stopped, he looked at his right hand. His entire right hand was full of cracks. Yi Xian's sword just now almost destroyed his entire right hand. Chen Yiming looked at Yi Xian. Very interesting. Yi Xian put away his heavy sword and changed to a light sword. His figure suddenly disappeared and he once again used the immeasurable sword. In the distance, bang. Yi Xian's sword was blocked by Chen Yiming's blade. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly pulled out the heavy sword from his back and fiercely slashed forward. Chen Yiming didn't retreat, he used his blade to block. Bang. A strong force exploded in front of the two of them. This time, Chen Yiming didn't retreat even half a step, while Yi Xian returned to his original position. However, the moment he stopped, the sword in his hand flew out again. The immeasurable sword. In the distance, Chen Yiming used his blade to block. Bang. Yi Xian's sword was directly deflected, but Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of Chen Yiming. He held the deflected sword and fiercely slashed forward. At this moment, Chen Yiming suddenly used his blade to block. Bang. Before Yi Xian's sword landed, he felt a sharp pain in his chest. Then he once again returned to his original position. Yi Xian was silent. From start to finish, this person in front of him didn't draw his blade. If the other party had drawn his blade, he would already be dead. Chen Yiming suddenly walked towards Yi Xian. According to what I know, within the same year, there aren't many who are more outstanding than you. Unfortunately, you are my academy's enemy. Yi Xian suddenly said, have you ever thought about why I became your academy's enemy? Chen Yiming stopped and looked at Yi Xian. Because that tower is in your hands. Yi Xian smiled. Why is that tower in my hands? Chen Yiming was silent. In a certain space, Lian Qian shook her head. This guy, if he could win, he wouldn't talk nonsense. If he couldn't win, he would reason. At this moment, Yi Xian added, because the tower recognized me as its master. Sir, is it my fault or the academy's fault that the tower recognized me as its master? Or is it teacher's fault? Chen Yiming frowned slightly. Teacher? Yi Xian said seriously, to be honest, I am teacher's new student. Moreover, I have received teacher's inheritance and control most of the Dao laws. Strictly speaking, you should call me junior. Do you really want us to fight each other? Lian Qian. P.S. Let me ask everyone a question. What is your average monthly income? I want to see what kind of industry is more popular. End of this chapter. Chapter 888. Opposite Yi Xian, Chen Yiming was silent. Seeing Chen Yiming's silence, Yi Xian said, Senior brother Chen. At this time, Chen Yiming suddenly said, why did you kill my students? Yi Xian said, Chen Tian and the others wanted to kill me. In order to protect myself, I could only kill. Chen Yiming shook his head. You are a flowery person with no truth. Yi Xian said, but Xiao Ta recognized me as his master, didn't he? Chen Yiming nodded. I know. As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. Take one strike from me. If you don't die after one strike, I'll do another. Yi Xian. Chen Yiming placed his left hand on the hilt of the saber behind his waist. He stepped forward and a saber intent enveloped Yi Xian. Yi Xian was about to speak when Lian Qian suddenly said, Run. Run. Yi Xian looked at Chen Yiming and shook his head. He knew that if he ran now, it would become a thorn in his heart, a thorn that could never be removed. Moreover, he believed that he couldn't escape. Even with the immeasurable sword, he couldn't escape. Moreover, he didn't think about running. Wasn't it just taking 2 strikes? Who was afraid of who? Yi Xian said, Can I use any method? Chen Yiming nodded, Yes. Yi Xian said with a smile, Come on. Chen Yiming nodded, drew his saber and slashed. It was a very casual Dao drawing slash. However, Yi Xian's expression changed drastically in an instant. Not only Yi Xian, but the sword spirit's expression also turned grave at this moment. She couldn't take this strike. Could Yi Xian take it? The sword spirit looked at Yi Xian. At this time, a 7-colored talisman suddenly flew out from between Yi Xian's eyebrows. World-breaking talisman. Facing Chen Yiming, Yi Xian didn't dare to hold back. He directly used the 7-colored talisman that Fu Wenzong had given him. The moment the talisman appeared, it suddenly turned into a sword tip and disappeared. Break the world. Boom. Space suddenly split apart because it wasn't able to endure the might of the talisman at all. Boom. Along with an explosion, the sound of shattering resounded. After a short moment, a talisman floated down from above Yi Xian. It was the 7-colored talisman. At this moment, the 7-colored talisman had already lost its luster. Damaged. Fortunately, he managed to block Chen Yiming's saber. Yi Xian put away the 7-colored talisman and looked at Chen Yiming. Chen Yiming nodded, as expected of a talisman drawn by him. It is indeed powerful. No wonder Master regarded him so highly in the past. As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. Take another strike from me. This time I won't hold back. As soon as he finished speaking, he took a step forward, and then the saber in his hand suddenly flew forward. It was a very slow strike, and it didn't carry any saber energy or glow. It was just a very simple strike. On the other hand, Yi Xian's countenance had turned pale at this moment. He knew that if he didn't use his full strength, then he would definitely die. Yi Xian didn't dare hold back at all. He suddenly stomped his right foot against the ground. When the saber arrived around 3 m away from him, a blood-red prisoner character suddenly appeared above the saber. At the same time, a strand of red light enveloped the entire saber. However, bang! The blood-red prisoner character instantly vanished. However, the saber had become much more illusory. Meanwhile, the saber had arrived before the center of Yi Xian's forehead. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly roared furiously, and a mysterious force suddenly appeared around him. The sword domain. It wasn't just the sword domain, there was the spatial Dao laws as well. Both of them were suppressing him at the same time. Bang! The saber suddenly stopped. However, at this moment, the saber had already pierced half an inch into the center of Yi Xian's forehead. The entire saber trembled violently, and so did Yi Xian's body. He was almost unable to withstand the power of this saber. Opposite Yi Xian, Chen Yiming didn't withdraw his saber, nor did he attack again. He just looked at Yi Xian. If he wanted to kill Yi Xian now, he only needed a single thought. Because if he attacked again, Yi Xian wouldn't be able to withstand it no matter what. However, he didn't draw his saber. Chen Yiming opened his palm, and the saber between Yi Xian's eyebrows suddenly flew into his hand. He turned and left. Behind him, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Why?" Chen Yiming stopped and said softly, "I really want to kill you because you are very outstanding. You are an enemy of the academy, and the academy will be in danger in the future." But, saying this, he raised his head and looked at the horizon and said softly, "Teacher once told me that no matter how strong my saber is, it can't be stronger than reason." I asked him what reason is, and he said that reason is in his heart. Saying this, he turned and looked at Yi Xian. Xiaota isn't from the Worldwide Academy, and the Universal Library isn't from the Worldwide Academy. The Worldwide Academy doesn't have the right to take these two things for themselves. Xiaota recognized you as his master, so it's yours. The academy is targeting you, and this is the academy's fault. If I come to kill you because of this, then it's my fault. However, if one day you want to destroy the academy, I will definitely kill you. Saying this, he turned and left. At this moment, Lian Qian suddenly appeared beside Yi Xian. She glanced at Chen Yiming's back and said softly, "He hasn't changed." Yi Xian looked at Lian Qian. Lian Qian said softly, "He is actually a pitiful person. He was originally a scholar, but his family was destroyed. It was Master who passed by and saved him. He knelt outside Master's door for 10 days and 10 nights, begging Master to help him take revenge. Master didn't help him take revenge, but taught him how to read and learn the saber. 5 years later, Master brought him to the sect that destroyed his family, and let him make his own choice." Yi Xian asked, "How did he choose?" Lian Qian said softly, "At first he was afraid, very very afraid. He was afraid that if he killed his enemies, Master would expel him from the academy. However, if he didn't take revenge, he wouldn't be satisfied. In the end, he still killed all his enemies. After killing all his enemies, he knelt in front of Master and kowtowed 3 times. Then he wanted to commit suicide, but Master stopped him. Master said to him, 'A life for a life. This is reason, and he didn't do anything wrong.'" Yi Xian was silent. Lian Qian continued, "From then on, he firmly remembered Master's words. Using reason as a saber, he achieved the unparalleled saber Dao. And he was respectfully called the Saber King." As she said this, she looked at Yi Xian. "You should be glad that it wasn't Wuxia who came to find you this time. Otherwise you might have died." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "Wuxia." Lian Qian said softly, "Among all of Master's disciples, her strength is second only to the headmaster. She doesn't like to study, but she likes to play with the spear. Her spear skills are unparalleled. In the academy, except for Master, she isn't afraid of anyone. In the past, she fought with eldest sister countless times. She is extremely powerful, and people call her the godly spear Zhang Wenxiu." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Miss Lian Qian, don't scare me." Lian Qian shook her head. When Master was around, there were many strong people in the academy. The academy was really good at that time. Unfortunately, after Master left, many things changed. Do you know? In the beginning, the people who fought for Xiao Ta weren't others, but our academy's own people. And the reason why the headmaster left was not because he didn't care about the academy, but because he knew that the hearts of the people in the academy had changed. He could change the academy, but he couldn't change the hearts of the people. Saying this, she paused and then continued, "The most changeable thing in the world is the hearts of the people." Yi Xian shook his head. "Looks like I have to work hard." Lian Qian nodded. "You do have to work hard. To open the Universal Library, you need Xiao Ta's cooperation. And since Xiao Ta has already recognized you as his master, the academy will treat you as the biggest threat." Yi Xian said, "But Xiao Ta isn't with me anymore." Lian Qian shook her head. "They won't believe it. They know Xiao Ta's ability. If he recognizes you as his master as long as you want, Xiao Ta will definitely return to your side." Yi Xian was speechless. Lian Qian continued, "The Worldwide Academy used to be the #1 power in the 5th dimension. You can't imagine how deep its foundation was. So, your top priority now is to become stronger and learn from the Sword Spirit. Also, you have to increase your realm." Yi Xian nodded. "I understand." Saying this, he looked at the Sword Spirit. "I'll have to trouble you during this period of time." The Sword Spirit nodded. "Let's begin." In the following period of time, Yi Xian continued to train with the Sword Spirit. However, he would also train with Lian Wanli sometimes. Thus, during this period of time, Lian Qian's improvement was very fast. On the side, Lian Qian had a trace of worry on her face. This was because she discovered that the people who had disappeared from the Worldwide Academy had started to appear one by one. She knew that these people wouldn't give up the World Prison Pagoda. Not everyone was like Chen Yiming. Thinking of this, Lian Qian sighed softly. She looked at Yi Xian, who was not far away. She could only say that everything depended on Yi Xian's luck. In fact, what she was really worried about was if Yi Xian really died at the hands of the Worldwide Academy. This was because once Yi Xian died at the hands of the Worldwide Academy, an enemy would appear in the Worldwide Academy. The woman in the plain dress. Would the woman in the plain dress be afraid of the Worldwide Academy? In her opinion, that woman would not be afraid of anyone. Would anyone in the Worldwide Academy be able to stop this woman? Even if a female teacher appeared, she might not be able to stop her. If Yi Xian died, the Worldwide Academy would be in big trouble. At the Worldwide Academy. After Lu Shidi took over the Worldwide Academy, he immediately started to reorganize the Worldwide Academy. One by one, the experts began to return to the Worldwide Academy. This was because the news that the Great Empress had single-handedly suppressed the Worldwide Academy had spread. Anger. At this moment, the experts of the Worldwide Academy were all furious. When had the Worldwide Academy ever been humiliated like this? Therefore, more and more experts of the Worldwide Academy returned to the Worldwide Academy. In other words, the Worldwide Academy had not been weakened because of the Shura Empress. Instead, it had become stronger and stronger. Because the main library of the Myriad Dimensional Academy had been destroyed, Lu Shidi moved to a library on the right side of the academy. At this moment, almost all the experts of the Worldwide Academy had gathered in the library. Beside Lu Shidi was Lin Xiaoshu. Lu Shidi looked at the crowd and said, "Everyone, since the establishment of the Worldwide Academy, this is the first time we have been humiliated like this." As he spoke, he stood up. "This humiliation must be washed away with blood." Below, an old man suddenly said, "Are we going to start a war with the Shura Hell?" Lu Shidi said calmly, "No, kill Yi Xian first." Chapter 889. They had to kill Yi Xian first. Everyone in the hall was silent. Yi Xian. Hearing this name, everyone's face turned gloomy. Yi Xian was the reason why the Worldwide Academy was bullied by the Empress, and it was also this person who killed many powerful people from the Worldwide Academy. At this time, Lu Shidi said, "Xiao Ta originally belonged to the Worldwide Academy, but it was seized by Yi Xian. The Worldwide Academy must take it back." Below, an old man said in a deep voice, "But Yi Xian has Fu Wenzong to protect him." Lu Shidi was expressionless. "So, let's kill Fu Wenzong first." Kill Fu Wenzong first. The expressions of everyone in the surroundings changed. Fu Wenzong wasn't a third-rate force. Fu Wenzong was considered a first-rate force. Although it was slightly worse than the Worldwide Academy, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that easy to kill Fu Wenzong. Even if they were killed, they would have to pay a terrible price. As if he knew what everyone was thinking, Lu Shidi suddenly said, "If the Worldwide Academy fought alone, it would naturally be difficult to kill Fu Wenzong, but what if someone helped us?" Someone helped us. In the hall, everyone looked at Lu Shidi. Lu Shidi said softly, Everyone get ready and wait for my orders. Soon, everyone in the hall left, leaving only Lu Shidi and Lin Xiaoshu. Lin Xiaoshu said, "Who did you find?" Lu Shidi said, "The corpse clan of southern border." Hearing this, Lin Xiaoshu frowned. "You found them?" Lu Shidi said softly, "Only they would be willing to destroy Fu Wenzong at all costs." Lin Xiaoshu asked, "Why?" Lu Shidi said with a smile, "Because the current corpse race's patriarch is the super genius who was chased out by Fu Wenzong back then." Lin Xiaoshu said softly, "It's him? Why did he go to the southern border? And he even became the corpse clan's patriarch?" Lu Shidi shook his head. "I don't know. When I was studying abroad, I went to that place. That guy was always thinking about revenge. That's exactly what we wanted." Lin Xiaoshu fell silent for a moment before he said, "According to my knowledge, Xiaota doesn't seem to be in Yi Xian's possession anymore." Lu Shidi said, "It's not in his hands, but that Xiaota has already recognized him as his master, and that Xiaota himself has seized the fortune of heaven and earth. As long as he wants, Xiaota will definitely return to his side. Moreover, this pagoda recognized him as its owner. In other words, if he was given the chance, he could open the universal library and obtain the treasures within. Therefore he must die." Lin Xiaoshu was silent. Lu Shidi said softly, "Xiaoshu, I know this isn't honorable, but think about it. The academy today isn't the academy of the past. If we don't obtain the treasures left behind by teacher, how can we fight against the super experts of this world? Or do you want the worldwide academy to experience the same situation as before, where life and death are in the hands of others?" Lin Xiaoshu was silent. It had to be said that he was suppressed by the Shura Empress alone, which made him feel very sullen. When had the worldwide academy ever suffered such humiliation? And the reason why it was humiliated was because the worldwide academy was currently weak. What the worldwide academy used in the past was no longer feasible. Thinking of this, Lin Xiaoshu sighed softly. "Do as you wish." After saying this, he turned around and left. Inside the hall, Lu Shidi was expressionless and didn't speak for a long time. Shurahel. Within a certain dark room, Yi Ling sat silently on a square chair constructed from a pile of bones, and there were two elderly men hovering behind her. And in front of Yi Ling a Xiaota floated. The World Prison Pagoda. The World Prison Pagoda trembled slightly as if expressing something. Yi Ling didn't speak. At this time, an elder behind Yi Ling suddenly said, "Master, this pagoda doesn't seem to reject you." Yi Ling looked at the World Prison Pagoda. She naturally knew why this Xiaota didn't reject her. This was his pagoda. After a moment, Yi Ling suddenly said, "I know you've awakened, give me an answer." No response. Yi Ling narrowed her eyes. A powerful pressure suddenly enveloped the World Prison Pagoda. At this time, a voice sounded from inside the pagoda, "I have no grievances with you, sir. Why must you be so overbearing?" Yi Ling looked at the World Prison Pagoda, "Give me an answer." The voice said, "Don't worry, sir. I won't seek death by targeting him." Yi Ling was silent. Killing intent condensed in her eyes. At this time, the voice spoke again, "Sir, I have no malice towards him. If I did, I would have already killed him in the fourth dimension. The reason why I can't leave this pagoda is because of me, not because I don't want to leave." After a moment of silence, Yi Ling pointed with her finger. A black light suddenly entered the World Prison Pagoda. Then she said softly, "Go." The World Prison Pagoda trembled slightly, turned into a black light and disappeared. At this time, the elder behind Yi Ling suddenly appeared and blocked the World Prison Pagoda. But the World Prison Pagoda directly crashed into him. Boom. The elder retreated several feet. When he stopped, the World Prison Pagoda had already disappeared. The elder looked at Yi Ling. "Master, you," Yi Ling said softly, "what do you want to say?" The elder spoke in a low voice, "Master, this is the key to the Universal Library. With this key you can open that library." "Master, why did you?" Yi Ling said, "It's just a library." The elder hesitated for a moment and said, "Master seems to care a lot about that young man Yi Xian." Yi Ling looked at the elder. The latter's expression changed and he hurriedly bent down. Yi Ling looked at the elder. "This person is related to me. The two of you can't touch him. Understand?" The elder nodded. "Your subordinate understands." Yi Ling slowly closed her eyes. "I'm going into closed-door cultivation for a while. In order to deal with those old geezers down there." The elder's expression instantly became solemn when he heard this. The Azura Hell. This place wasn't called hell for nothing. Yi Ling's face was emotionless. She suddenly looked at her right hand, and there was a small wooden figure there. The two elders behind her didn't dare say anything and left silently. High up in the clouds, Yi Xian, who was sparring with Lian Wanli, suddenly stopped and looked up into the sky. A black dot was flying over from there, and it didn't take long for the pagoda of prison to appear in front of Yi Xian. "I'm back?" Yi Xian was stunned. Meanwhile, the pagoda of prison directly entered Yi Xian's chest. Yi Xian blinked. What's going on? Why did Xiao Ta fly back by himself? Yi Xian opened his palm, and the pagoda of prison appeared within it. The pagoda of prison trembled violently as if it was trying to express something. Yi Xian chuckled lightly and said, "All right, I won't make you go out and attract firepower in the future." The pagoda of prison flickered on the spot, and then it transformed into a ray of black light that entered Yi Xian's body. The pagoda of prison. Yi Xian smiled slightly. Actually, after spending so much time with the pagoda of prison, he still had feelings for it. Moreover, the pagoda of prison seemed to be closer to him than before. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian's face suddenly turned ashen. Xiao Ta's return wasn't entirely a good thing. There was still a 9th floor in this pagoda. I wonder if this guy is easy to talk to. Without thinking too much, Yi Xian put away the pagoda of prison. He looked at Lian Wanli in front of him and said, "Come, continue." As soon as he finished speaking, he directly rushed out. In the distance, the corner of Lian Wanli's mouth lifted slightly. He drew his saber and slashed, and the azure dragon roared. On the side, the sword spirit walked to Lian Qian's side and said softly, "His comprehension isn't particularly high, but he is very hard-working." Lian Qian nodded. "If he doesn't have top-notch talent and doesn't work hard, then what hope does he have?" The sword spirit said softly, "Master was also very hard-working back then." Lian Qian said, "I'm very curious, did he die or?" The sword spirit said, "His lifespan ended." Lifespan. Lian Qian was silent. There were many strong people in this world, and most of them died because their lifespan ended. Who could not die? Even the most powerful person would have a day when their lifespan ended. Could anyone live forever? She didn't know because she had asked the prophet, but she didn't get an answer. Just like that, after about 5 days, Yi Xian began to cultivate the sword soul. The reason why he cultivated the sword soul was actually to support his sword rule. Moreover, he had the soul-subduing sword, so he couldn't waste the soul-subduing sword's special ability to target the soul. In the following time, Yi Xian began to cultivate his soul crazily. Time passed day by day. During this time, the worldwide academy was very quiet, and there was no movement. It was worth mentioning that Qin Tian had left the worldwide academy. As for where he went, no one knew. Fu Wenzong. Inside the rune hall, Xin Xinghe's face was gloomy, and beside him was Lu Yong. Xin Xinghe suddenly said, "The worldwide academy is too quiet." Lu Yong nodded, "It's very abnormal. I've already asked our people to return to Fu Wenzong." Xin Xinghe said, "What about little Grandmaster?" Lu Yong said, "We lost contact. However, he should be fine." Xin Xinghe shook his head. "No, since Lu Shidi has appeared, the other 6 headmasters might also appear. If these people target little Grandmaster, he will be in a very dangerous situation. We have to contact him and ask him to return to Fu Wenzong quickly." Lu Yong nodded, and at this moment the expressions of the 2 people in the hall suddenly changed. In the next moment, the 2 of them disappeared from the hall. Outside the hall, more than 10 corpses suddenly fell from the sky, accompanied by blood. These corpses landed steadily in front of Lu Yong and Xin Xinghe. They were all Fu Wenzong's people. Seeing this, Xin Xinghe's expression immediately became gloomy. He raised his head to look at the sky, but there was no one there. Lu Yong said softly, "They've made a move." Xin Xinghe said, "How many people are willing to come and help?" Lu Yong said, "The weapon refining sect has already agreed to help us. They'll be here soon." Xin Xinghe asked again, "What else?" Lu Yong said, "There are some aristocratic families, but they don't have many experts. As for those top forces, none of them have expressed their stance. I guess they don't want to get involved in this mess." Xin Xinghe sneered, "When these people usually beg us, they all talk about climbing a mountain of knives and plunging into a sea of flames. Now that I, Fu Wenzong, have something to do, they all play dumb." Lu Yong said softly, "This is how the world works." Xin Xinghe was about to speak, but at this moment, a cloud of black gas suddenly appeared in the distant sky. The next moment, this cloud of black gas directly covered Fu Wenzong. At this moment, Lu Yong's expression changed greatly. "There's poison. Be careful." In the sky, a man suddenly appeared. This person was the current academy master of the worldwide academy, Lu Shidi. In the sky, Lu Shidi looked down. If Yi Xian appears, concentrate on killing this person first. If he doesn't appear, then kill Fu Wenzong's people one by one until he appears. P.S. Sorry brothers, I made a mistake. Recently, I was brought to a healthcare center by a reader, and for a moment I couldn't control myself and became muddle-headed. My fault. I will definitely control myself in the future. I will definitely not go to an illegal healthcare center. I will send everyone a red packet. Chapter 890. In the mountains, Yi Xian, who was sparring, suddenly stopped. He took out a voice transmission talisman. After a while, he frowned and a cold light flashed in his eyes. At this moment, the sword spirit suddenly said, "What's wrong?" Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Something happened to my sect." He did not expect that the worldwide academy would besiege Fu Wenzong. They were going to fight to the death. The sword spirit nodded slightly. "Are you leaving?" Yi Xian nodded and looked at the sword spirit. "Miss Sword Spirit, do you want to go together?" The sword spirit shook her head. "I won't leave this place." Yi Xian hesitated and was about to speak when the sword spirit said, "This is my home. Don't say anything more." Yi Xian was silent. At this moment, Lian Qian's voice suddenly sounded in his mind. "She won't leave. Master wanted to take her away, but she didn't want to leave." Yi Xian looked at the blind swordsman not far away and said softly, "Miss Sword Spirit, are you going to keep watching over him?" The sword spirit smiled. "This is my home." Yi Xian sighed and did not try to persuade her. He bowed slightly and said, "Miss Sword Spirit, I'll come back to you after I've settled my matters." The sword spirit nodded. "Sure." Yi Xian smiled. "See you later." After saying that, he flew up on his sword and disappeared into the sky in the blink of an eye. The sword spirit was silent for a while, then she turned and left. After a while, she picked a large bouquet of flowers and placed them in the pool, letting them drift with the water. Looking at the petals floating on the water, the sword spirit's eyes gradually became infatuated. Fu Wenzong. At this moment, above Fu Wenzong there was a black cloud layer. Within that black cloud layer there were countless powerful auras. Down below, Xin Xinghe looked up at Lu Shidi, who was in the air. "So it's Master Lu." In the air, Lu Shidi looked down at Xin Xinghe and said, "You Fu Wenzong have never offended our worldwide academy. You Fu Wenzong brought this upon yourself. You can't blame anyone else." Xin Xinghe smiled and said, "Estate head Lu, it was clearly your worldwide academy that coveted my little grandmaster's world prison pagoda. What, you want to be a whore and also want to erect a chastity memorial arch?" Lu Shidi chuckled. "I hope Sect Master Shen can still talk later." As he spoke, he looked at the opposite side. "What? You're not coming out to meet your martial nephew?" A middle-aged man walked out from the black clouds in the distance. Upon seeing this middle-aged man, Xin Xinghe's face instantly darkened. "Yan Tian, it's you." Yan Tian. Hearing this name, the expressions of some of the Fu Wenzong experts changed. Yan Tian was a famous genius of Fu Wenzong in the past. Moreover, he was also Xin Xinghe's martial uncle. However, for some unknown reason he was directly expelled from Fu Wenzong by the previous Fu Wenzong sect master. One must know that according to seniority, Yan Tian should have been the sect master back then. Xin Xinghe glared at Yan Tian. "You still have the face to return." Yan Tian smiled. "What, you don't welcome your martial uncle?" Xin Xinghe sneered. "Martial uncle? You were expelled from the sect and you still have the face to call yourself my martial uncle? Did you eat too much shit?" In the air, Yan Tian narrowed his eyes. "My good martial nephew, after so many years, your ability to talk has become even better." As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his right hand and a dozen experts wrapped in black clothes suddenly flew out from the black clouds. Seeing this, Xin Xinghe's expression changed. "Southern borders, celestial corpses. Defend." As soon as Xin Xinghe's voice fell, a few Fu Wenzong experts suddenly appeared in the surroundings. Instead of charging forward, they each took out a powerful orange talisman. Orange talismans shot into the sky and engulfed the celestial corpses in the air. At this moment, a giant celestial corpses suddenly flew down from the black clouds. The celestial corpses held a giant axe in his hand and he swung it down from the sky. The powerful force tore through the power of the talismans and his target was Xin Xinghe. Xin Xinghe remained expressionless. He opened his palm and a perfect orange talisman shot into the sky. The orange talisman turned into a bolt of divine lightning and struck the celestial corpses. Boom! Countless bolts of lightning exploded in the sky. However, the celestial corpses were unharmed. Xin Xinghe's expression sank when he saw this. Impossible? Ha! Not far away, Yin Tian suddenly burst into laughter. My good junior nephew, are you surprised? I've specially refined these celestial corpses to deal with your talismans. Looks like they're quite effective. As soon as he finished speaking, he gently pressed his right hand down and the giant celestial corpses charged down from the sky. The orange talismans were completely ineffective against it. Shen Xinghe's expression turned ugly when he saw this. In the sky, Yin Tian suddenly laughed and said, My good junior nephew, there are many surprises waiting for you. As soon as he finished speaking, he gently clapped his hands. 3 more giant celestial corpses appeared from the black clouds behind him. Soon, 4 celestial corpses charged down from the sky. Fu Wenzong's talismans were completely ineffective against the celestial corpses. The expressions of the Fu Wenzong experts turned extremely ugly when they saw this. Talismans were their forte. If their talismans were ineffective against them, it would be as good as cutting off their own arms. It was not that Fu Wenzong did not have other experts who did not rely on talismans, but there were very few of them. At this moment, the sound of a sword suddenly rang out in the distance. In the sky, Lu Shidi frowned and looked into the distance. In the next moment he suddenly retracted his gaze and looked down. There, 2 celestial corpses had been sent flying. The one who had attacked them was not Yi Xian but a little girl. Xiaoqi. Xiaoqi looked at the other 2 celestial corpses. She pointed with her finger and a ray of sword light slashed out. Boom. The ray of sword light slashed one of the celestial corpses. The celestial corpses retreated rapidly with a deep sword wound on their bodies. Seeing that something had happened to Xiaoqi, Shen Xinghe immediately heaved a sigh of relief. He turned to look at Lu Yong who was beside him. Don't use the talismans on these corpses. Use them on the experts from the Worldwide Academy. Also, tell everyone not to hold back. Use the talismans to smash them to death. Lu Yong nodded. He turned to look at the surroundings and shouted angrily, Don't hold back, smash them. As soon as he finished speaking, countless talismans flew into the sky from within Fu Wenzong's body. These talismans were all orange in color. It could be said that only Fu Wenzong would be able to take out such a large amount of talismans. Other sects, even the Worldwide Academy, would not use orange talismans like this. It was simply a waste. Only Fu Wenzong would dare to do this. Countless orange talismans flew into the sky. Their power was simply terrifying. In the sky, Lu Shidi's expression also became gloomy at this moment. This was because the experts from Fu Wenzong and the people brought by Yin Tian were being forced to retreat. The orange talismans alone were not particularly terrifying, but if so many of them were gathered together, it would be truly frightening. In the sky, explosions sounded continuously. The entire sky was filled with either wind or thunder. If it wasn't thunder, then it was fire. In any case, all kinds of chaotic energy gathered together, forming a huge hodgepodge. Lu Shidi looked around and frowned. Where was this Yi Xian? Actually, he had always been on guard against Yi Xian. This was because he knew that Yi Xian was extremely good at concealment and assassination. Therefore, he had not dared to let the true experts from the Worldwide Academy attack. Lin Xiaoshu was also secretly waiting for an opportunity. As long as Yi Xian appeared, all the forces would instantly focus on Yi Xian. However, Yi Xian did not appear. What was going on? Lu Shidi's right hand gripped the flute tightly. He felt that something was wrong. At this moment, not far away, Yin Tian suddenly said angrily, Brother Lu, why aren't you letting the experts from the Worldwide Academy attack? At this moment, more than 50 of the god corpses that he brought with him had already fallen. Although the 4 super god corpses were not affected by the talismans, they were being blocked by Xiaoqi alone. If this went on, he would suffer heavy losses. At this moment, Lu Shidi suddenly said, Brother Yin, as far as I know, you still have a few more blood corpses. Hearing this, Yin Tian narrowed his eyes and a cold light flickered in his eyes. Brother Lu, what's wrong? We're attacking Fu Wenzong together, but you don't want to do anything? Lu Shidi shook his head. Of course not, Brother Yin. The most terrifying thing about Fu Wenzong right now isn't the Shen Xinghe or that little girl with the sword. It's the Yi Xian. If we don't guard against him, we'll pay a terrible price. Yin Tian said in a low voice, Lu Shidi, I'm not going to argue with you. I only have one question. Are your people going to attack or not? If not, the old man will turn around and leave right now. Lu Shidi frowned. Brother Yin, don't you know how terrifying Yi Xian is? Yin Tian said fiercely, I only know that my people are dying one after another. Lu Shidi, are you trying to let all my people die so that you can take advantage of the situation? Lu Shidi was about to speak when Yin Tian suddenly roared furiously, Are you going to attack or not? Lu Shidi glanced at Yan Tian and said, Attack. As soon as he finished speaking, a few old men suddenly appeared behind him and they charged down. Even though there were only 4 of them, their strengths were extremely formidable, and they directly destroyed a huge expanse of talisman energy. Coupled with Yan Tian's super god corpses, they seemed to be on the verge of a counterattack. On the other hand, Lu Shidi grew even more vigilant. He didn't dare underestimate Yi Xian because the Worldwide Academy had paid a terrible price for underestimating Yi Xian. Moreover, he knew that Yi Xian was extremely skilled in concealment and assassination. Yi Xian didn't draw his sword, but once he did, his enemies would definitely die. However, Yi Xian still hadn't appeared. Below, Shen Xinghe and the others were still madly activating the orange talismans. These orange talismans were like paper. Under the situation where Shen Xinghe and the others were madly activating the orange talismans, Yan Tian's side was once again at a disadvantage. Yan Tian looked at Lu Shidi and was about to speak. Right at this moment, the space in front of Lu Shidi suddenly trembled. In the next moment, his expression changed greatly. He's gone to the academy. Not good, his target is the worldwide bookstore. Let's go back to the academy. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and directly disappeared into the horizon. Chapter 891. At that moment, Lu Shidi was shocked. He finally knew why Yi Xian didn't appear. It wasn't that Yi Xian didn't appear but that he had gone to the Worldwide Academy. Now that there was no one at the Worldwide Academy who could stop Yi Xian. More importantly, the Worldwide Book Room was at the Worldwide Academy. If Yi Xian had the key to the prison tower, he might be able to open the Worldwide Book Room. Once it fell into Yi Xian's hands, Lu Shidi didn't dare to think about it. At that moment, all the Worldwide Academy experts rushed back to the Worldwide Academy. Yan Tian, on the other hand, was dumbfounded. They ran just like that? Below, Seven suddenly said, Leave them here. The moment she said this, she tapped the ground and turned into a sword light that charged into the sky. When he saw that, Yan Tian's expression changed. Retreat. Very quickly, everyone retreated. Fu Wenzong naturally wouldn't give up this chance and chased after them. One had to say that Fu Wenzong's fighting was really interesting. He just smashed talismans like crazy. He was just so rich. However, Yan Tian and the others fled really quickly and Fu Wenzong and the others weren't able to stop all of them. In the sky, Lu Yong suddenly said, We can't chase them. Head to the Worldwide Academy. When she heard Lu Yong's words, Seven stopped. Lu Yong said, Little Ancestor has headed to the Worldwide Academy and is in danger. We have to rush to the Worldwide Academy. Seven nodded, Let's go. The moment she said this, she turned into a sword light and disappeared into the horizon. Lu Yong suddenly said, Bring all the talismans. Take out all that Fu Wenzong has accumulated. If Little Ancestor is in danger, then blow up the Worldwide Academy. Very quickly, all the experts from Fu Wenzong rushed to the Worldwide Academy. The entire sect was out. At that moment, numerous people were shocked. Fu Wenzong was risking his life. Worldwide Academy. Under Lian Qian's instructions, Yi Xian quietly arrived at the Worldwide Academy. After he entered a grand hall, he walked along the secret Dao Yi path in the grand hall. He used the immeasurable sword, so no one noticed him along the way. However, when he reached a door at the end of the secret passage, a mirror on the wall suddenly shone on him. Yi Xian's expression immediately changed. He knew that he had been discovered. Yi Xian casually waved his hand and put the mirror away. Then he sped up and quickly passed through the door. Not far behind the door sat an old man. The old man wore a loose robe and had a long beard. He supported himself with a walking stick and just sat there quietly without any signs of life. On either side of him were rows of bookshelves. On the bookshelves were all sorts of ancient texts. Behind the old man was a door of light. Above the door of light was the seal of a tower. Yi Xian glanced at it. It was the same seal as the one in the prison pagoda. Clearly, behind this door was the legendary world-dimensional bookhouse. Then, who was this old man in front of him? Yi Xian asked in his heart. Miss Lian Qian? Lian Qian said in a deep voice, I don't know this person. Yi Xian glanced at the old man. Do you think he will hit me? Lian Qian said, You can try. Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. Boom. An explosion suddenly sounded. The next moment Yi Xian returned to his original position. And the old man was still sitting there. Where he stood, Yi Xian's expression turned ugly. This old man's strength was unfathomable. At this moment, Lian Qian suddenly said, Retreat. Without any hesitation Yi Xian turned and left. Because he had been discovered. He knew that if he stayed here he would definitely die when the experts from the Worldwide Academy rushed back. He couldn't be greedy, and the old man didn't chase after him. Soon Yi Xian arrived outside. At this moment he sensed countless powerful auras in the distant sky. Yi Xian didn't hesitate and was about to flee. At this moment, an angry shout suddenly resounded from above the clouds. "Where do you think you're going?" As soon as the voice finished speaking, an ancient book suddenly flew down from the sky. The next moment, a resplendent white light erupted from the ancient book. This white light enveloped the entire Worldwide Academy and shone on where Yi Xian was. And the space he was in started to tremble violently. At the same time, dozens of powerful auras enveloped him. Yi Xian's expression sank. He had been discovered. He had just woken up and was about to use the teleportation talisman when a mysterious force suddenly appeared in the surrounding space. This force directly suppressed the space he was in. Just as he was about to use the spatial Dao Law, Lu Shidi and the others appeared in front of him. Along with them were dozens of super experts from the Worldwide Academy. These people surrounded Yi Xian tightly. Yi Xian asked in his heart, "Miss Lian Qian, what should we do?" Lian Qian said, "Surrender." Yi Xian was speechless. Lian Qian added, "Perhaps you can reason with them." Yi Xian thought for a moment and felt that this method was feasible. He was about to speak when Lu Shidi suddenly said, "Kill him. Don't hold back." Everyone attacked together. As soon as he finished speaking, the flute in his hand suddenly transformed into a green ray of light that shot explosively towards Yi Xian. Lin Xiaoshu, who was next to him, also suddenly made a move. He opened his palm and a thick book appeared in his palm. In the next moment the ancient book suddenly flipped open and pages flew out. These pages were like blades that flew towards Yi Xian. One blade after another, extremely sharp. Meanwhile, the surrounding experts from the Worldwide Academy attacked as well. Yi Xian was stunned. They didn't even give him a chance to speak. He naturally couldn't resist so many people attacking at the same time. However, at this moment he had to resist even if he couldn't. Yi Xian's body suddenly ignited. It wasn't soul ignition, but he had devoured a drop of ancestral heavenly dragon blood, strengthening his body. When the dragon blood entered his body, Yi Xian's body underwent an earth-shattering change. Scales suddenly appeared all over his body. At this moment Yi Xian felt like his entire body was filled with boundless energy, but it still wasn't enough. So, he immediately circulated the energy of the earth, and it instantly converged throughout his body. Yi Xian suddenly drew his sword and swung it forward. Bang! A world-shaking explosion suddenly resounded. Yi Xian retreated madly, and the scales throughout his body actually started to crack inch by inch. When he was 3 kilometers away, all the scales on his body had fallen off, and then his body started to crack apart. When he finally stopped moving, countless rifts had appeared all over his body, and some of the rifts were so deep that even his internal organs could be seen. Even though he'd survived it, he was in an extremely terrible state. His entire body had changed beyond recognition, and he didn't seem like a human anymore. However, the expressions of Lu Shidi and the others grew even more solemn. Yi Xian had actually resisted their joint attack. Was that normal? Of course it wasn't. Lu Shidi stared fixedly at Yi Xian. At this moment he finally understood why Qin Tian had been constantly targeting Yi Xian. If Yi Xian was allowed to grow, then he would definitely become a huge threat to the academy. He was truly too monstrous. Lu Shidi was just about to attack again when a group of experts suddenly rushed over from afar. It was Shen Xinghe, Fu Wenzong and the other experts. Shen Xinghe instantly heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that Yi Xian was still alive. He'd been afraid that he would be too late. Fortunately, Yi Xian was still alive. Lu Shidi gazed at Yi Xian from afar, and the killing intent in his eyes wasn't concealed at all. Meanwhile, Shen Xinghe spoke abruptly, "Young martial ancestor, you leave first." "Leave first?" Yi Xian shook his head. He knew that the Worldwide Academy wouldn't let them leave today. Yi Xian took out a bottle of life spring water and drank it. Soon his body began to recover at an extremely fast speed. Meanwhile, rays of white light suddenly shot into the sky from all around the Worldwide Academy. The white light formed a huge light shield that enveloped the surroundings, and more experts from the Worldwide Academy appeared in the surroundings. Obviously they didn't intend to let Yi Xian and the others leave. Below, Shen Xinghe's face was expressionless. "Young martial ancestor, you leave first." Lu Yong wanted to say something but hesitated. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly said, "Old Shen, don't even think about leaving." Shen Xinghe looked at Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian had recovered about 50% to 60%. Yi Xian smiled and said, "They won't let us leave. We only have a single choice now, and it's to fight them to the death." Lu Yong nodded, just as young martial ancestor said, "We have no way out now. If we lose this battle, then I, Fu Wenzong, will vanish from this world, and I won't have any chance to make a comeback. So we can only fight." As he spoke, he gazed at Yi Xian. "Young martial ancestor, can you still fight?" Yi Xian smiled, "Of course." As soon as he finished speaking, he withdrew another drop of ancestral heavenly dragon's blood and drank it. In next to no time, a strand of formidable energy converged within his entire body. This energy was intoxicating. Yi Xian slowly clenched his right fist. He raised his head to look at Lu Shidi and then he grinned, "Dean Lu, do you dare to fight me?" A declaration of war. Everyone looked at Yi Xian when they heard this. Yi Xian intends to challenge Lu Shidi? In midair, Lu Shidi gazed at Yi Xian. He was slightly surprised because he hadn't expected that Yi Xian would challenge him. In all fairness, Yi Xian was absolutely not a match for him. Regardless of whether it was combat experience or cultivation, Yi Xian was absolutely not a match for him. However, Yi Xian had done it. There's something fishy going on. Lu Shidi shook his head and smiled, "All right." He knew that there was something fishy going on, but he still accepted the challenge. It was a problem of morale. If he didn't fight, then it would severely affect their morale. Moreover, why would he have to fear Yi Xian? In midair, Lu Shidi walked slowly towards Yi Xian and he grinned, "Yi Xian, I'm very curious about exactly how." Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly vanished. In the blink of an eye, a blood-red prisoner character suddenly appeared above Lu Shidi, and then a strand of formidable energy instantly enveloped Lu Shidi. At the same time, a ray of light suddenly arrived in front of Lu Shidi, and another formidable energy enveloped Lu Shidi as soon as it arrived. The sword domain. At the instant that the sword domain appeared, Lu Shidi's expression finally changed. At this moment he sensed the aura of death. Right at this moment, Lin Xiaoshu suddenly attacked. He tossed out an ancient book and smashed it against the blood-red prisoner character. Bang! The prisoner character trembled violently, and it was at this moment that Lu Shidi was blasted 300 m away. However, he'd lost his right hand. Everyone in the surroundings was stunned. Meanwhile, Yi Xian glanced at Lin Xiaoshu and Lu Shidi and then he spat, "Tui? Shameless." Everyone was speechless. P.S. Have any readers gone on a blind date? What should I pay attention to when going on a blind date? Besides that, what should I tell them if they ask about my income? Should I tell them the truth or exaggerate a little? Chapter 892. At that moment, the faces of the Worldwide Academy powerhouses in the field were a little ugly. They had agreed on a one-on-one fight, but Lin Xiaoshu had suddenly attacked. That was really a little disgraceful. Lin Xiaoshu was silent. He also knew that it was disgraceful to do so, but he had to attack just now because if he hadn't, Lu Shidi might have died. Lu Shidi's strength was far superior to Yi Xian's, and he was caught off guard by Yi Xian. If he was killed just like that, it wouldn't be worth it. Therefore he attacked. In the distance, Lu Shidi's face was frighteningly gloomy at that moment. He really didn't expect that he would almost be killed by Yi Xian. He didn't look down on Yi Xian. On the contrary, he valued Yi Xian very much. However, Yi Xian's sword just now was far beyond his expectations. Yi Xian used several kinds of power in that sword, and each of them could be said to be able to destroy heaven and earth. At that moment, Yi Xian suddenly chuckled and said, "Is this the so-called one-on-one fight?" As he said that, he glanced at the Worldwide Academy powerhouses in the field and laughed. "This is a one-on-one fight?" Ah. In the field, Fu Wenzong and the other powerhouses all had disdainful expressions. Yi Xian's realm was much lower than Lu Shidi's. Even so, the Worldwide Academy still wanted to fight 2 against 1. This kind of behavior was really despicable. In the air, the expressions of the Worldwide Academy powerhouses were also extremely ugly to look at. They wanted to fight back but found that there was no way to do so. Indeed, they were the ones who were being unreasonable. At that moment, Lu Shidi, who was not far away, suddenly said, "Yi Xian, I underestimated you." Yi Xian smiled and said, "Since you underestimated me, then the two of you can come at me together." Lu Shidi looked at Yi Xian. "I'll lower my realm to fight you and I'll lower my realm by 1 realm." As soon as he said that, his realm suddenly plummeted. Soon he directly became a cosmos realm. Lu Shidi looked at Yi Xian. "Again?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "When you're about to lose, you let someone else do it?" Lu Shidi said, "Don't worry. This time no one will make a move." Yi Xian thought for a moment and then he said, "How about this? For the sake of absolute fairness, we won't utilize our profound energy, divine abilities, or any divine treasures, and we'll compete in basic cultivation. Alright? Lu Shidi was about to speak when Lin Xiaoshu suddenly said, "I'm afraid it's a trap." Yi Xian laughed and said, "I am, haha." Lin Xiaoshu looked at Yi Xian. "Showy and dirty tricks. He's not a good person." Yi Xian asked, "Are you a good person?" Lin Xiaoshu was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly waved his hand and said, "I don't want to fight a war of words with you. It's just a matter of whether you want to fight or not." Lin Xiaoshu was about to speak when Lu Shidi suddenly said, "Xiaoshu, don't interfere." Lin Xiaoshu wanted to speak but hesitated. Lu Shidi smiled and said, "Or, in your heart, I'm really not as good as him?" Lin Xiaoshu didn't say anything and retreated to the side. In the distance, Yi Xian opened his palm, and a sword appeared in his hand. This sword wasn't the executing heaven sword, but a very ordinary sword. Lu Shidi opened his palm, and there was a green flute in his hand. "This is an ordinary long bamboo flute." Yi Xian nodded and said, "Then let's start." As he said this, he seemed to think of something and suddenly looked at Shen Xinghe and the others on the right. "Seniors, no matter what happens later, don't do anything. Don't be like others. We, the people of Fu Wenzong, even if we die, we must die with integrity." Hearing Yi Xian's words, the blood of the Fu Wenzong powerhouses in the field suddenly boiled. "Shen Xinghe, this chapter is not finished, please continue to the next page." Suddenly he laughed and said, "Good job, little grandmaster. We, the Fu Wenzong, are proud of you." After that he looked at Lu Shidi who was opposite him. Lu Shidi smiled and said, "Don't worry, no one in the Worldwide Academy will help me." As he said this he looked at Lin Xiaoshu and said, "I can die but don't let others look down on the academy." After a moment of silence, Lin Xiaoshu nodded. Lu Shidi looked at Yi Xian and said, "Let's begin." Yi Xian stood with his sword in hand and did not make a move, using silence to stop the enemy. In the distance, Lu Shidi also did not make a move. Because of what happened before, he did not dare to underestimate Yi Xian. This young man before him really had the ability to kill him. Just like that, the two of them were in a deadlock. In the distance, Yi Xian suddenly said in his heart, "Miss Lian Qian, this person before me and Chen Yiming are both headmasters, but I feel that this person is not as strong as Chen Yiming." He still remembered that Chen Yiming's strength could be said to completely crush him. Lian Qian said softly, "Firstly, this person before you is not weak. He was careless and did not guard against you, so you killed him when he was least expecting it. If he was prepared, you would not have been able to hurt him. Secondly, among the headmasters there are strong and weak ones. Chen Yiming's strength is only second to Wen Xiu's among the headmasters. Also, this person before you is not weak. In my opinion, your chances of winning are less than 20%. However, you are sneaky, so I have decided to give you a bonus. You have at least a 40% chance of winning." Sneaky. Yi Xian was speechless. To think that he was such a person in Lian Qian's heart. Without thinking too much, Yi Xian looked at Lu Shidi who was opposite him. This battle was going to be a tough one. At this moment, Lu Shidi suddenly walked toward Yi Xian. Seeing this, everyone looked at Lu Shidi. Lu Shidi walked very slowly as if he was taking a stroll. He walked slowly toward Yi Xian with a calm smile on his face. Not far away, Shao Qi frowned slightly. Force. Lu Shidi was using an invisible force to suppress Yi Xian. He wanted to force Yi Xian to make the first move, or crush Yi Xian with his aura. Shao Qi looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian naturally knew Lu Shidi's goal, but he did not make a move. Lu Shidi was getting closer and closer to him, forcing him to make a move. Yi Xian still did not make a move. When Lu Shidi was 6 feet away from Yi Xian suddenly walked toward Lu Shidi. He held the sword in his hand calmly. Just like that, the two of them got closer and closer. When they were 5 feet apart, Lu Shidi suddenly smiled. "You are really patient. Then let me go first." As soon as he finished speaking, he was about to make a move. But at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly charged forward and slashed at him with his sword. It had to be said that this slash was extremely good, and the timing was very accurate. Unfortunately, in his opinion, this slash was not a threat to him. Under everyone's gaze, Lu Shidi suddenly held his flute and pushed forward. He was confident in his strength. At this moment, the light sword in Yi Xian's hand was suddenly replaced by a heavy iron sword. Boom. As soon as Lu Shidi reacted, he retreated more than 10 feet away. Before he could stop, a flying sword suddenly slashed at him. This was not a sword driven by qi but a flying sword driven by pure physical strength. Lu Shidi narrowed his eyes and blocked with his flute. Bang. The flying sword was directly blocked. At this moment, Yi Xian had already appeared in front of Lu Shidi. He held the heavy sword with both hands and slashed down. Although he did not use Xian Qi, this slash was still extremely heavy. This chapter is not finished, please continue to the next page. Physical strength. At this moment, Lu Shidi understood why Yi Xian sealed his Xian Qi to fight with him. It was because Yi Xian's physical body was strong enough. Without thinking too much, Lu Shidi suddenly attacked. Bang! Yi Xian returned to his original position. After he stopped, he waved his hands and the heavy sword and light sword returned to his hands. Yi Xian looked up at Lu Shidi. In that instant, Lu Shidi's attack was faster than his. Lu Shidi looked at Yi Xian. Without any nonsense, he suddenly opened his palm and pointed lightly. The flute in his hand suddenly turned into a green light and flew out. Although he did not use Xian Qi, the flute's speed was like a bolt of lightning. Faster than his flying sword. In the distance, Yi Xian blocked with his sword. Bang! Yi Xian's arms trembled violently and he retreated. In the process of retreating, Lu Shidi suddenly appeared in front of him. The next moment, Lu Shidi punched at his head. The punch was like thunder. Yi Xian did not dodge the punch. He turned his left wrist and stabbed forward with his sword. This stab was aimed at Lu Shidi's chest. A life for a life. Lu Shidi frowned slightly. He did not expect this. He did not choose to exchange his life with Yi Xian because, in his opinion, his strength crushed Yi Xian. Exchanging his life with Yi Xian was a very stupid thing to do. Lu Shidi retracted his hand and pressed down. Bang! Yi Xian's sword was pressed to the ground, and at this moment, Yi Xian's body suddenly collided with him. Lu Shidi blocked with his left hand. Bang! With an explosion, Lu Shidi took a few steps back. At this moment, a heavy sword slashed down from above his head. The sword fell and the sound of air being torn resounded. At this moment, Lu Shidi gently moved his fingers and a green light suddenly blasted at Yi Xian's chest. Bang! Yi Xian was directly sent flying. The moment he flew out, Lu Shidi, who was in the distance, suddenly took a quick step forward. With this step, he came directly in front of Yi Xian and punched Yi Xian's face. Yi Xian almost instinctively slashed forward with his sword. The fist and the sword collided. Bang! Yi Xian retreated again, and as soon as he stopped, a green light was already in front of him. It was that flute again. Yi Xian took a small step back with his sword in hand. Then he thrust his sword forward. This thrust directly stabbed the flute. Bang! Yi Xian's iron sword cracked, and at this moment, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. Almost at the same time, the light sword in Yi Xian's hand was replaced by a heavy sword. He held the sword with both hands and slashed. Bang! With a muffled sound, a figure retreated more than 10 feet away. It was Lu Shidi. As soon as Lu Shidi stopped, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of him, and Yi Xian slashed down with his sword. Right at this moment, a sudden change occurred. A powerful force suddenly swept out from Lu Shidi's body, and this force instantly enveloped Yi Xian. At the sight of this, the expressions of Fu Wenzong and the other experts changed drastically. Lu Shidi utilized his profound energy. Not far away, Yi Xian hadn't even reacted when the sword in his hand was seized by Lu Shidi. Then Lu Shidi took the opportunity to stab his sword into Yi Xian's abdomen and he grinned. "Are you surprised? Are you surprised?" End of this chapter. Chapter 893. The eyes of Xin Xinghe and the others almost split open when they saw Lu Shidi stab his sword into Yi Xian's stomach. On the other hand, the experts of the Worldwide Academy were stunned as well. They hadn't expected that Lu Shidi would suddenly utilize profound energy. Even Lin Xiaoshu hadn't expected Lu Shidi to suddenly do that. Doing so was dishonorable. But it was good because they could directly deal with Yi Xian and eliminate a huge problem for the academy. In the distance, Lu Shidi started laughing when he stabbed Yi Xian's sword into Yi Xian's stomach. A fair duel? In his opinion, there was no such thing as fairness in this world. Even when his teacher was still alive, there was no such thing as absolute fairness. The victor was king. That was the eternal truth of this world. So long as Yi Xian died and Fu Wenzong was destroyed, then everyone would forget about Yi Xian and Fu Wenzong in less than a month. History would only remember the victor. Right at this moment, his expression changed drastically because Yi Xian had suddenly grinned, and then a sword was stabbed into the center of Lu Shidi's forehead. The soul-suppressing sword. The soul-suppressing sword had suppressed Lu Shidi's soul. This sudden and unexpected event shocked everyone here. Lin Xiaoshu was about to attack when a huge amount of talismans covered the heavens and the earth as they surged towards him. The experts of the Worldwide Academy attacked in succession. However, Fu Wenzong's group didn't stand by idly and charged forward. In front of Yi Xian, Lu Shidi looked at Yi Xian in shock. You. Right at this moment Yi Xian suddenly withdrew the executing heaven sword and then he swung it swiftly. Lu Shidi's head flew into the air. His body was destroyed. On the other hand, the soul-suppressing sword had directly absorbed Lu Shidi's soul. Yi Xian was expressionless. He hated nonsense the most. The more nonsense there was, the more unforeseen events would occur. If he continued to talk nonsense with Lu Shidi, what if other experts from the Worldwide Academy came to save him? At that time he would cry. Therefore it was better to kill him first. Actually, if Lu Shidi didn't play dirty tricks he really couldn't beat him. Although his heavy sword and light sword were strong, Lu Shidi's realm was too high, and his battle awareness was even stronger than his. Therefore if they fought normally he had no hope of winning. However, he did not expect that Lu Shidi would go back on his word again. He did not expect that Lu Shidi would use his sword to kill him. Lu Shidi did not underestimate him at first, but the moment he was stabbed Lu Shidi relaxed. Because Lu Shidi thought that the outcome was already set. And this moment was Yi Xian's chance. After the soul-suppressing sword absorbed Lu Shidi's soul, its aura suddenly skyrocketed. It was going to evolve. Yi Xian was delighted. He hurriedly put the soul-suppressing sword into the prison pagoda, and then he looked at Lin Xiaoshu who was not far away. At this moment, the one fighting Lin Xiaoshu was Xiaoqi, and only Xiaoqi could barely hold back Lin Xiaoshu. Yi Xian stomped his right foot. A ray of sword light tore through the field. Boundless sword. In the distance, Lin Xiaoshu's expression suddenly changed. He suddenly turned around and a ray of sword light had already arrived between his eyebrows. The sword had entered half an inch. At this moment of life and death, an illusory ancient book suddenly appeared above Lin Xiaoshu's head. Boom. Yi Xian and Xiaoqi were directly sent flying by a powerful force. After Yi Xian stopped he looked at Lin Xiaoshu. At this moment, Lin Xiaoshu was wrapped in a golden light. At this moment, Lian Qian's voice rang in Yi Xian's mind. The book of holy words was given to him by Master in the past. This book is a defensive treasure, and with the protection of the holy words, your sword won't be able to break it. Yi Xian was silent. Damn, this Worldwide Academy had too many treasures. As if he had thought of something, he suddenly opened his palm, and the executing heaven sword flew in front of Xiaoqi. You use this sword. Xiaoqi looked at Yi Xian and Yi Xian said, you hold him back, I will kill the others. Xiaoqi nodded, okay. After saying that, she held the executing heaven sword and charged out. The sound of the sword rang out, shaking the sky. One had to admit that Xiaoqi was really strong. It could be said that if Yi Xian didn't use those messy external items, he might not be able to defeat Xiaoqi. After Xiaoqi held Lin Xiaoshu back, Yi Xian charged towards the experts from the Worldwide Academy. With his current strength, how could these experts from the Worldwide Academy be a match for him? Instant kill. When Yi Xian's sword passed, heads would fall to the ground. Stop Yi Xian. At this moment, Lin Xiaoshu's voice rang out in the sky. Very quickly, some experts from the Worldwide Academy rushed towards Yi Xian, but at this moment Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. Boundless sword. The experts from the Worldwide Academy glanced at each other. Where's Yi Xian? Suddenly, a shrill cry resounded from behind them. All of them turned around and they saw a man's head flying into the air. However, Yi Xian still hadn't shown himself. The experts from the Worldwide Academy were horrified when they witnessed this scene. Xiaoqi was suddenly blasted away. Lin Xiaoshu looked down and then he opened his palm, and the book of holy wisdom appeared in his hand. Meanwhile, a ray of light slashed towards him from the right. Yi Xian. This time Yi Xian's target wasn't anyone else but him. Up until now, Lin Xiaoshu was the strongest fighter in the Worldwide Academy. If he could deal with Lin Xiaoshu, then the rest would be nothing to worry about. However, his sword slashed directly against the golden light emanated by the Book of Holy Wisdom. Bang! Yi Xian was blasted flying again. When he stopped moving, Xiaoqi walked over to Yi Xian's side and spoke softly, he's invincible with that thing. Yi Xian glanced at the surroundings. At this moment, Fu Wenzong and the experts from the Worldwide Academy were locked in battle. Fu Wenzong's individual combat strength was inferior to the experts from the Worldwide Academy. However, Fu Wenzong had talismans and they'd made up for this gap. Meanwhile, Lin Xiaoshu suddenly said, get out of the formation. The formation. Lin Xiaoshu had just descended when an ancient golden book suddenly shot into the sky from below. Bang! The entire sky was covered by an expanse of golden light, and it didn't take long for countless golden ancient characters to appear in the surroundings. These ancient characters floated about in the surroundings, and every single one of them emanated extremely formidable energy. Fu Wenzong and the other experts hurriedly retreated when they witnessed this scene, and then they gathered together and withdrew all sorts of formidable defensive talismans. Meanwhile, Lu Yong suddenly appeared by Yi Xian's side, and he spoke in a low voice, "Young martial ancestor, we have to leave this sect. Otherwise, we'll forever be in a passive position." Li Fu Wenzong. Yi Xian glanced at the surroundings. "It's quite difficult to leave now." Lu Yong asked, "Do you have a way?" Yi Xian replied, "Leave if you have the chance later. Don't pay attention to me and Shao Qi. Understand?" Lu Yong hesitated to speak, but Yi Xian spoke softly, "All of you leave. I'll be able to protect myself." Lu Yong nodded, "All right." Yi Xian looked up into the sky. The golden characters were growing in number, and strands of formidable energy were appearing incessantly in the surroundings. In midair, Lin Xiaoshu suddenly pressed down lightly with his right hand, and it didn't take long for the golden characters to start trembling violently. A short moment later, countless golden characters suddenly descended from the sky. The expressions of Xin Xinghe and the others instantly changed when they witnessed this scene. The consequences would be unimaginable if they were allowed to descend. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly floated into the air. He opened his palm, and a long brush suddenly appeared in his hand. Lin Xiaoshu, who was hovering in the air, immediately paled at the sight of this long brush. The Heaven Condemnation Brush. Yi Xian grinned, and then he waved the brush. In an instant, an enormous brush shield suddenly appeared above him. Fu Wenzong and the other experts, and the ancient characters in the sky smashed against the brush shield. Rumble. Numerous explosions resounded incessantly in the surroundings. On the other hand, Yi Xian's countenance instantly turned pale. He hurriedly withdrew a bottle of life spring water and gulped it down. Meanwhile, Xin Xinghe suddenly said, "Give him a healing talisman." As soon as he finished speaking, a few dozen orange healing talismans suddenly flew towards Yi Xian. Bang, bang, bang. Beams of emerald green light burst out of Yi Xian's body. Yi Xian was speechless. The golden characters in midair were completely blocked by Yi Xian's heaven-punishing brush. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly grinned, and then he suddenly pointed his brush towards the sky. "Attack!" As soon as he spoke, the enormous brush shield suddenly trembled violently, and then countless golden characters suddenly shot out from within it. Copy. Not only could this brush attack and defend, but it could also copy. When he saw the countless ancient characters rushing towards him, Lin Xiaoshu's face instantly darkened. He naturally recognized this heaven-punishing brush. It was also the treasure of the Worldwide Academy. Yi Xian took the treasure of the Worldwide Academy and used it to attack the Worldwide Academy. Without much time to think, Lin Xiaoshu suddenly took a step forward. He waved his right hand, and the Book of Holy Divinity suddenly flew out. In the next moment, rays of golden light poured down from the sky like a waterfall. Rumble. In an instant, the entire sky began to tremble violently, and countless waves of air rippled in all directions. And at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm, and a mirror appeared in his hand. He silently recited an incantation, and the next moment, the space in the sky suddenly began to overlap. Myriad-dimensional realm. Seeing this mirror, Lin Xiaoshu's face turned even uglier. How many treasures of the Worldwide Academy did Yi Xian have? He didn't have much time to think, because the myriad-dimensional mirror was a group attack treasure, and ordinary disciples of the Academy couldn't block it at all. Lin Xiaoshu raised his hands, and the overlapping space in the surroundings suddenly began to slowly return to its original state. And at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly soared into the sky. He didn't attack Lin Xiaoshu, but instead slashed towards the right. Bang! The light screen that was covered with golden characters was directly slashed apart by his sword. Yi Xian hurriedly said, "Let's go." Lu Yong immediately roared, "Let's go." Soon he and Xin Xinghe led the many Fu Wenzong experts and flew towards the horizon. Yi Xian looked at Shao Qi, and Shao Qi nodded. Yi Xian stomped his right foot, and turned into a ray of sword light that soared into the sky. Shao Qi also followed closely behind. And at this moment there was a sudden change. Below, a powerful force suddenly soared into the sky. Shao Qi, who was behind Yi Xian, sensed the danger and immediately turned around to slash. Bang! The ray of sword light shattered, and a powerful force directly swept Shao Qi downwards. Yi Xian, who had already disappeared into the horizon, suddenly stopped. Without the slightest hesitation, he directly turned around and rushed into the Worldwide Academy. P.S. Recruit a walk-on, a very interesting walk-on, leave your name. Chapter 894. Yi Xian had just rushed back to the Worldwide Academy when the sound of a sword rang in front of him. Then, a figure retreated in front of him. This person was Shao Qi. At this moment, Shao Qi's mouth was stained with blood and his expression was extremely solemn. Yi Xian raised his head and looked not far away. There stood an old man. It was this old man who had attacked just now. It's him. At this moment, Lian Qian's voice suddenly rang in Yi Xian's mind. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Who? Lian Qian said in a low voice, Han Ji. Back then, the head hierarch of the Academy's Wuyuan was in charge of teaching martial arts to all Wuyuan students. He was not one of the 6 hierarchs, but his strength was no weaker than them. Yi Xian was silent. At this moment, Shao Qi suddenly said, "Be careful." Yi Xian nodded and looked up at the sky. Fu Wenzong and the other powerhouses had already retreated. He did not ask Xin Xinghe and the others to come over because it was too disadvantageous for them to fight in the Worldwide Academy. In the sky, Xin Xinghe looked in the direction of the Worldwide Academy below. Go and get that thing. Lu Yong was shocked. Senior brother. That thing is my Fu Wenzong's last resort. Xin Xinghe looked at Lu Yong. Is the person more important or that thing? Lu Yong did not say anything else and immediately turned to leave. As Xin Xinghe had said, nothing was more important than Yi Xian. He had to protect Yi Xian at all costs. Worldwide Academy. Han Ji, who stood before Yi Xian and Shao Qi, spoke abruptly in a light voice. I never imagined that the day would come when my Myriad Dimension Academy would fall to such a state. Someone actually attacked our academy, how shameful. Lin Xiaoshu walked to Han Ji's side and said calmly, we cannot escape the blame for falling to such a state. Han Ji nodded. Yes. With that he looked at Yi Xian. I've heard of you. It's said that you have the treasure of the Worldwide Academy. Yi Xian grinned. He opened his palm and the prison pagoda appeared in his hand. It's in my hands. Do you want it? Han Ji looked at Yi Xian. You're very confident. He is also very arrogant. Yi Xian laughed. I'll fight even if I'm confident. I'll still fight even if I'm not confident. Why shouldn't I be more arrogant? Han Ji nodded. Lu Shidi died in your hands, which proves that you have strength. Come, let me see how strong you are. As soon as he finished speaking, he stomped his right foot. Boom. The space in front of Yi Xian suddenly shattered. Yi Xian suddenly roared, gather. As soon as he finished speaking, the space in front of him suddenly returned to its original state. Space Dao Law. At this moment, a long spear pierced through the air. Yi Xian unsheathed his sword and slashed. Boom. An explosion resounded. Yi Xian retreated rapidly. Han Ji, who was in front of him, also retreated several feet. After Yi Xian stopped, the executing heaven sword in his hand suddenly flew out. Immeasurable sword. The sword was like a thunderclap. It was extremely fast. In the distance, Han Ji narrowed his eyes and blocked with his spear. Boom. The long spear shook violently and he retreated instantly. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared above his head. Just as Yi Xian was about to attack, Han Ji twisted his wrist and the long spear in his hand suddenly stabbed at Yi Xian's abdomen. His speed was faster than Yi Xian's. Moreover, the spear was longer than the sword. However, in the air, Yi Xian did not retract his sword. Instead, he forcibly moved his body slightly to the right. Boom. The long spear pierced through Yi Xian's right shoulder while Han Ji retreated over 30 feet away. There was a deep sword mark on his right shoulder. Yi Xian had been hit by his spear, but Han Ji had also taken a sword from Yi Xian, and this sword had almost severed his left hand. Han Ji looked at Yi Xian. He was still not used to Yi Xian's fighting style. Exchanging injury for injury, exchanging life for life. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already in front of Han Ji. At this moment, Han Ji suddenly brandished his long spear. In an instant, spear after spear of light continuously shattered the space around him. The powerful spear of light directly engulfed Yi Xian. At this moment, within the powerful spear of light, sword after sword appeared continuously. Boom, boom, boom. The surrounding space trembled. After about a quarter of an hour, Yi Xian and Han Ji suddenly disappeared. Lin Xiaoshu's face sank when he saw this. Book Realm. In the Book Realm, Han Ji looked around with a solemn expression. Naturally, he recognized this Book Realm. This book realm could suppress one's cultivation level. Once one's cultivation level was suppressed, his chances of winning against Yi Xian would be lower. Moreover, there were word spirits in this book realm. Yi Xian looked at Han Ji and without a word, he vanished on the spot. In the next moment, a sword suddenly appeared in front of Han Ji. On the tip of the sword there was a dot of blood red. The word spirit of the word, destroy. Han Ji's eyes narrowed slightly at the sight of this, and then he suddenly soared into the air. Moreover, in the next moment, the spear in his hand suddenly slashed down. He didn't dodge but chose to meet it head-on. As soon as the sword and spear collided, boom! An earth-shattering explosion suddenly resounded. Then both of them retreated at the same time and stopped almost at the same time. Han Ji looked at the spear in his hand. The body of the spear had cracked. After a moment of silence, he looked at the sword in Yi Xian's hand. What a good sword. I didn't expect that the treasures of my worldwide academy would recognize you as their master. Moreover, that unruly word spirit is also willing to pledge loyalty to you. You're quite capable. Just at this moment, Yi Xian, who was in the distance, suddenly disappeared. Han Ji reacted extremely quickly and suddenly rushed forward. As he rushed forward, countless spear lights shot out. These spear lights instantly drowned Yi Xian, and within these spear lights, a sword light suddenly tore through. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Within the book realm, a series of rumbles sounded continuously. After a moment, a figure suddenly flew out. It was Yi Xian. After Yi Xian stopped, a trace of blood slowly flowed out from the corner of his mouth. He looked at the opposite side and saw that Han Ji was holding 2 spears in his hands. 2 spears? Han Ji looked at Yi Xian. I have to say Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. Before he arrived, his sword arrived first. Light sword. This sword was extremely fast. However, for an old powerhouse like Han Ji, Yi Xian's sword speed was not fast enough. He blocked with his spear and accurately blocked Yi Xian's sword. At this moment, Yi Xian's light sword suddenly turned into a heavy sword. Yi Xian wielded the heavy sword and swept it horizontally. Boom! Han Ji was instantly swept away by Yi Xian's sword. Yi Xian suddenly took a quick step forward. At this moment, the heavy sword in his hand had changed into a light sword. This sword did not have the great power of the heavy sword, but it was as fast as lightning. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. The next moment, a long spear suddenly attacked from the back of Yi Xian's head. Yi Xian dodged sideways and avoided this spear by a hair's breadth. At the same time, he twisted his wrist and slashed his sword horizontally, aiming for Han Ji's abdomen. Han Ji blocked with his spear. However, at this moment, Yi Xian's long sword suddenly turned into a heavy sword. Rumble. Han Ji was once again sent flying. The moment he was sent flying, Yi Xian's heavy sword turned into a light sword again. The sword was like a sudden clap of thunder flashing past. In the distance, Han Ji's pupils suddenly shrank. He raised his spear and stabbed. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly grasped the light sword, and the light sword instantly turned into a heavy sword. The sword arrived. Rumble. Han Ji retreated rapidly again. He could not completely withstand the power of Yi Xian's heavy sword. Before Han Ji could stop, Yi Xian once again rushed in front of him. Soon the two were engaged in a fierce battle. At this moment, Yi Xian actually showed signs of suppressing Han Ji. Of course, this was also because of the book realm. If not for the suppression of the book realm, he would not be able to fight against Han Ji. After all, the other party's realm was much higher than his. Just like this, after about a quarter of an hour, Yi Xian directly suppressed Han Ji. Sword rule. As Yi Xian fought with Han Ji, he became more and more proficient in using sword rule. Of course, the most important thing was the executing heaven sword in his hand. This sword was too sharp. After losing the advantage of his realm, Han Ji did not dare to face this sword head-on. To Yi Xian, the only flaw was that he lacked a good heavy sword. The heavy sword he was using now was given to him by the sword spirit. It was very ordinary. If this heavy sword was the same as the executing heaven sword, his strength could increase by at least 10 to 20%. About a quarter of an hour later. Boom. The surrounding bookshelves in the book realm suddenly shook violently. Immediately, 2 figures retreated rapidly at the same time. After Yi Xian stopped, the sword in his hand suddenly flew out. In the distance, Han Ji suddenly clasped his hands together, and this time he directly caught Yi Xian's sword. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of him, and at the same time, a heavy sword slashed down from above his head. Han Ji's pupils suddenly shrank. He hurriedly let go of the executing heaven sword and dodged backward. At this moment, Yi Xian's heavy sword suddenly turned into the executing heaven sword again. This time, the sword directly pierced into Hanji's chest. However, it only pierced half an inch because at some point in time Hanji's long spear had also pierced into Yi Xian's chest. This time Hanji chose to exchange injury for injury. And at this moment Yi Xian suddenly rushed forward. He directly let Hanji's long spear pierce through his chest, and at the same time his sword also pierced through Hanji's body. A life for a life. Hanji did not expect Yi Xian to be so ruthless. He looked at Yi Xian and grinned, "With our strength neither of us can kill the other." At this moment the executing heaven sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly turned into the soul-suppressing sword. The moment it turned into the soul-suppressing sword, Yi Xian directly retreated more than 10 feet away, while Hanji's whole body was stunned on the spot. Soul fixation. At this moment Hanji's soul was directly fixed by the soul-suppressing sword. Hanji looked at Yi Xian and was about to speak, but suddenly, a sword suddenly flashed past his neck. Hanji's head directly flew off, and his soul was instantly absorbed by the soul-suppressing sword. He did not even have the chance to resist. And in the distance Yi Xian sat on the ground. There was a large hole in his chest. In fact, he was also seriously injured. This battle was not won easily at all. In the battle with Hanji he used the book realm, the word spirit, the executing heaven sword, the soul-suppressing sword, and the dragon blood in his body, especially the ancestral blood of the heavenly dragon. If not for the ancestral blood of the heavenly dragon, his physical strength would not have been able to suppress Hanji. All in all, this time it was not easy for him to win. It could be said that he gave it his all. At this moment, sitting on the ground, Yi Xian's expression suddenly changed. And at this moment, Lian Qian's voice suddenly sounded in Yi Xian's mind, "That woman is here. Run. Run." At this moment, a light laugh suddenly sounded from within the book realm. The next moment, the book realm actually began to collapse inch by inch. Chapter 895. This sudden turn of events caused Yi Xian's expression to change drastically. Someone could forcefully destroy the book realm? He didn't even have the time to think about it when the space here suddenly shattered into pieces. His face instantly turned as pale as a sheet of paper. Very soon Yi Xian appeared in the Worldwide Academy. Blood continuously flowed from the corner of his mouth. Not far from his right, Shaoqi knelt on one knee on the ground. In front of her was also a pool of blood. Yi Xian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He looked in the distance and saw a woman standing there. She was wearing a dark golden dress that dragged on the ground. Flowing lights overflowed from her dress, as if it was the convergence of a galaxy. It was dazzling. Behind her, 2 long sleeves fluttered in the wind. On the sleeves, 2 black phoenixes were embroidered with their heads held high. In the eyes of the phoenixes, there was a domineering aura that looked down on the world. On her feet she wore a pair of pure black cloth shoes. However, if one looked closely, they would discover that this pair of cloth shoes was actually made of dragon skin. What was worth mentioning was the woman's long hair. The woman's hair reached her waist and her entire body was golden. In front of her forehead, 2 strands of bangs fluttered. The woman's appearance was also peerless. She had an oval face, phoenix eyes, and the slight curve at the corner of her mouth made her look somewhat cynical and unruly. This person was the Worldwide Academy's Zhang Wenxiu. In terms of strength, she was only second to the female teacher of the Worldwide Academy. In the past, this Zhang Wenxiu was much more terrifying than the female teacher. This was because the female teacher was kind and had never made enemies with anyone. The people of the 5th dimension were also smart and would not provoke the female teacher. However, this Zhang Wenxiu was different. She was a crazy witch in the past. If you did not provoke her, she would provoke you. In the 5th dimension, this woman's reputation could be said to be notorious. Even within the Worldwide Academy, no one dared to provoke her. This was because she was really good at fighting. Zhang Wenxiu sized up Yi Xian, then looked at Lin Xiaoshu. "Is this the guy who killed Lu Shidi and Hanji?" Lin Xiaoshu nodded. "Yes." Zhang Wenxiu suddenly threw a slap at Lin Xiaoshu. Lin Xiaoshu's expression changed as he raised the Book of Holy Words to block the slap. Boom. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Lin Xiaoshu and the Book of Holy Prophecy were sent flying. Not only that, but the Book of Holy Prophecy also split open. Everyone, Yi Xian's eyelids twitched when he saw this. This woman is extraordinarily strong. At this time, Zhang Wenxiu glanced at the Worldwide Academy powerhouses and made a shameful face. "How embarrassing. You guys are such a disgrace." As she spoke, she suddenly pointed at Lin Xiaoshu. "Especially you, you're practically a piece of trash. How can you still have the face to live? If I were you, I'd just find a piece of paper and kill myself. And that Lu Shidi and Tianji, they're both super big pieces of trash. They've cultivated for so many years, yet they were killed by a kid who hasn't even grown his hair yet. It's good that they're dead, it's so fucking good that they're dead. Everyone, Yi Xian had a strange expression on his face. Is there something wrong with this woman? At this moment, Zhang Wenxiu suddenly looked at Yi Xian and sized up Yi Xian. You're quite capable. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, be reasonable. It was your worldwide academy who came looking for trouble with me first. Be reasonable? Zhang Wenxiu sneered. What the hell is that? Yi Xian. At this moment, Lian Qian's voice suddenly rang out in Yi Xian's mind. Run. Just as Yi Xian was about to speak, Zhang Wenxiu suddenly grabbed with her right hand and a powerful force enveloped Yi Xian. Come out. As soon as she finished speaking, she lifted her right hand and directly pulled Lian Qian out of the world prison pagoda. At this moment, Yi Xian's expression became extremely solemn. This woman's strength was even more terrifying than Chen Yiming's. Yo tsk, Zhang Wenxiu sized up Lian Qian. I was wondering who it was. So it's Lian Qian. So you're not dead yet? Lian Qian looked at Zhang Wenxiu and did not speak. Zhang Wenxiu looked around. Where's your big sister? Don't tell me she's dead. If that's the case, I'll be very sad. You know that if I can't kill her with my own hands, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Lian Qian's face was expressionless. If you're so powerful, why don't you go and fight with the headmaster? Zhang Wenxiu suddenly slapped Lian Qian. Lian Qian narrowed her eyes and put her hands together. A seal suddenly appeared in front of her, but the seal instantly shattered. Boom. Lian Qian instantly retreated. When she stopped, a trickle of blood slowly flowed from the corner of her mouth. Zhang Wenxiu looked at Lian Qian expressionlessly. We haven't seen each other for so many years, but your eloquence is getting better. Yi Xian suddenly said, I think her eloquence is still not as good as yours. Zhang Wenxiu looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. I've heard a lot about the Worldwide Academy. I have to say that I'm quite impressed by the former prophet and some of the people from the Worldwide Academy. However, after interacting with you guys for so long, I've realized that you guys are really a pile of dog sh*t. As he said that, he pointed at Zhang Wenxiu angrily. You can't stand others doing well. That Xiaota recognized me as his master. This is Xiaota's own choice. Why can't the academy let him? Also, when you beat up the young, the old comes. What? Does the Worldwide Academy only know how to bully the young? Zhang Wenxiu sneered. Don't talk to me about this nonsense. Of course, as you said, the academy is indeed a pile of dog sh*t. Yi Xian was speechless. Zhang Wenxiu continued, Actually, I've been annoyed by this academy for a long time. Unfortunately, it was created by teacher. No matter how much I dislike it, I can't destroy it with my own hands. I won't let others destroy it either. As for bullying the young, I feel that since I'm stronger than you, why can't I bully the young? If you're so capable, you should become stronger too. The corner of Yi Xian's mouth twitched. This woman was not playing by the rules. Zhang Wenxiu looked at Lian Qian. Lian Qian, no matter what, you were created by teacher. I can't believe you helped an outsider destroy the academy. I didn't know that you had such a rebellious bone in you. Lian Qian was expressionless. Zhang Wenxiu, he's not an outsider. He's master's inheritor. Zhang Wenxiu suddenly said angrily, Bullsh*t. How many years is teacher different from him? Inheritor? Do you think I'm a pig? Lian Qian said in a low voice, Xiaota has recognized him as his master. Zhang Wenxiu was expressionless. Is Xiaota master? Xiaota is just a piece of trash created by teacher. Can he represent teacher? At this moment, the prison pagoda in Yi Xian's body suddenly trembled. Yi Xian was speechless. Zhang Wenxiu looked at Lian Qian coldly. Even if he's teacher's inheritor, so what? Am I not teacher's inheritor? Also, have you forgotten what teacher said in the past? Those who harm each other will be punished by the heavens and earth. This kid killed Lu Shidi. If he's teacher's inheritor, then he's a taboo in our sect. Lian Qian was about to speak when Zhang Wenxiu suddenly waved his hand. Why am I wasting my time talking nonsense with you? Really, it's a waste of time. I'll deal with you guys first, then I'll go and destroy Fu Wenzong. How dare any Tom, Dick, or Harry bully my academy? As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly clenched her right hand towards Yi Xian from afar. In an instant, the space around Yi Xian started to warp. Yi Xian was horrified and he suddenly roared furiously, Break! As soon as he spoke, The space Dao Law suddenly appeared between his brows, and it didn't take long for the space before him to start shattering. However, his face instantly turned pale. In the distance, Zhang Wenxiu laughed coldly. Space Dao Law. As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly waved her right hand. With just a light wave, the space before Yi Xian started to shatter layer by layer, and Yi Xian retreated explosively. When Xiao Qi saw this, she transformed into a ray of sword light that slashed towards Zhang Wenxiu. It was a very powerful attack. However, Zhang Wenxiu's eyes were filled with disdain, and she stomped her right foot lightly. Bang! The ray of sword light shattered, and Xiao Qi was blasted flying. She couldn't fight back at all. The gap between them was too huge. After Yi Xian stopped moving, he glanced at his body. At this moment, his body was actually covered in cracks. Moreover, his Space Dao Law had suffered a heavy injury just now as well. This was the first time his Space Dao Law had been injured. This woman was even more terrifying than Qin Yiming. Meanwhile, Xiao Qi walked over to Yi Xian's side, and she gazed at Zhang Wenxiu in the distance as she spoke in a low voice. This woman is very strong. Yi Xian nodded. She outsmarted her opponent. Xiao Qi gazed at Yi Xian. Let's watch your performance. Yi Xian nodded slightly, and then he gazed at Zhang Wenxiu. Miss Wenxiu, I want to say a few words before you kill me. Before Zhang Wenxiu could speak, Lin Xiaoshu suddenly said, Don't let him speak. Zhang Wenxiu looked at Lin Xiaoshu, and Lin Xiaoshu said solemnly, This person has a glib tongue and he is good at tricks. It is better to kill him directly. Zhang Wenxiu looked at Lin Xiaoshu. You don't want him to speak, but I want him to. Lin Xiaoshu's face twitched. Was there something wrong with this woman? Although he thought so, he didn't dare to say it out loud. He knew that apart from his former teacher, she wouldn't give face to anyone else. Zhang Wenxiu looked at Yi Xian, and Yi Xian quickly said, Miss Wenxiu, you can't be considered an expert if you kill me. If you have the ability, then kill the people behind me. Do you dare? Zhang Wenxiu smiled. Are you trying to provoke me? Yi Xian said, That's right. It's a provocation. Miss Wenxiu, do you dare to follow me to kill the people behind me? Zhang Wenxiu laughed out loud. You don't say, I want to meet the people behind you. After all, we have to do things in one go. Lead the way. Yi Xian looked at Zhang Wenxiu and then at Lian Qian and 7. Enter the tower. 7 didn't hesitate and entered the prison tower. Lian Qian hesitated and then said, Who are you going to find? Yi Xian said, Let's enter the tower. Lian Qian looked at Yi Xian and didn't say anything else. She entered the prison tower. Yi Xian looked at Zhang Wenxiu. Let's go. After saying that, he turned around and left. In the distance, Lin Xiaoshu wanted to say something, but Zhang Wenxiu suddenly said, Shut up. You retard, stop wasting air. After saying that, she followed Yi Xian. Lin Xiaoshu. P.S. Do you dare to vote for me? Chapter 896. Within the Worldwide Academy, Lin Xiaoshu's expression was extremely unsightly. Based on his understanding of Yi Xian, he was definitely going to play some dirty tricks. That was why he had asked Zhang Wenxiu to kill Yi Xian directly to prevent any future troubles. However, this crazy woman just had to go against him. This crazy woman. Lin Xiaoshu sighed softly. No matter what, this woman still cared about the Worldwide Academy. This time, if it wasn't for this woman's appearance, the Worldwide Academy would probably have lost even more people. As for the Great Formation at the Worldwide Academy, unless it was absolutely necessary, it couldn't be used. This was because it was a deterrent. Once it was used, the Worldwide Academy would lose its final trump card. At that time, the Worldwide Academy would completely lose its current status. Moreover, there would definitely be many forces that would have designs on the Worldwide Bookstore. That was why the Great Formation couldn't be used carelessly. With the current strength of the Worldwide Academy, it could only be used once a year at most. Lin Xiaoshu collected his thoughts and looked into the distance. He hesitated for a while, but in the end he still didn't follow her. He was afraid that if he followed her, it would only ruin things. After all, that woman wasn't normal. In the distant horizon, Yi Xian was flying on his sword. Beside him was Zhang Wenxiu. One had to admit this Zhang Wenxiu was very confident. Of course, she had the capital to be so confident. At this time, Zhang Wenxiu suddenly smiled and said, I'm a little surprised that you were able to make that Xiao Ta recognize you as his master. Yi Xian said, I've seen Qin Yiming before. Zhang Wenxiu said calmly, among the few disciples of master, he's the only one who's decent. It's just that he's a little pedantic. He's always trying to reason with people. He's simply out of his mind. Yi Xian glanced at Zhang Wenxiu and thought to himself, Miss Lian Qian, how did your master fall for this crazy woman in the first place? After a moment of silence, Lian Qian said, although this woman is crazy, don't underestimate her. I'm not talking about her strength but her knowledge. Her knowledge is only a little less than that of the headmaster. Or rather, her knowledge is on par with that of the headmaster. Yi Xian frowned. Is this woman that knowledgeable? Lian Qian said, she is very knowledgeable, and she is the only one in the academy who dares to argue with master. However, she never showed off her knowledge or disdain. She said that her master's methods were useless in this world where only the strong were respected. She also said that the reason why the fifth dimension was so harmonious in the past was because of her master's formidable strength. If her master was weak, others wouldn't even pay attention to him. Therefore, in her opinion, strength is the king. If you have strength, people will be willing to listen to you. If you don't have strength, even if you are reasonable, people will still treat you like a fart. Yi Xian was silent. He had to admit that what this woman said made sense. If a person didn't have strength, who would take him seriously? As the saying goes, don't join the crowd if you don't have money, and don't persuade people if your words are light. At this time, Lian Qian said, this woman has another special strength, and that is the Tao of idealism. She created her own Tao and everything is done according to her heart. Therefore, if she wants to be reasonable, she will be reasonable. If she doesn't want to be reasonable, she will be unreasonable. Speaking up to this point, she paused and then continued, I think that she is a little similar to you. Just like you can be shameless when you want to be. Yi Xian's face was full of black lines. How could she say that? At this time, Zhang Wenxiu suddenly said, have you seen teacher? Prophet. Yi Xian shook his head. I haven't seen him. After a moment of silence, Zhang Wenxiu said softly, I've been looking for him for a long time. Yi Xian said, why did he suddenly disappear? Zhang Wenxiu's face was expressionless. Who knows? As she said that, she suddenly opened her right hand. The next moment, the World Prison Pagoda in Yi Xian's body flew into her hand. The World Prison Pagoda trembled slightly. It was very fearful. Zhang Wenxiu looked at the World Prison Pagoda. Do you know where teacher is? The World Prison Pagoda shook its head. Zhang Wenxiu narrowed her eyes. As far as I know, when teacher disappeared, you were with him. The World Prison Pagoda trembled slightly as if expressing something. Zhang Wenxiu still wanted to say something but Lian Qian suddenly said, when teacher disappeared in the end it was very strange. Not to mention it even we don't know. After a moment of silence, Zhang Wenxiu threw the World Prison Pagoda in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian kept the World Prison Pagoda and looked at Zhang Wenxiu. Don't you want to open teacher's study room with this pagoda? Zhang Wenxiu said calmly, teacher isn't in the study room. Why would we open it? Saying this, she looked at Yi Xian. Do you think I'm like the others who covet teacher's treasures? If I had such thoughts, would this stupid pagoda have been able to escape? Hearing this, Yi Xian suddenly understood. He understood why Zhang Wenxiu had such a bad attitude towards the people from the Worldwide Academy. This woman must be very disgusted with the people from the Worldwide Academy coveting the Prophet's treasures. At this moment, Zhang Wenxiu suddenly said, who are you taking me to? Yi Xian said, we'll be there soon. Zhang Wenxiu glanced at Yi Xian. Let's make a bet. Let's bet whether you'll die today or not. Yi Xian did not hesitate. Bet that I won't die. What a joke. Of course he would bet that he wouldn't die. Zhang Wenxiu shrugged. Looks like I can only bet that you'll die. Yi Xian smiled. What's the bet? Zhang Wenxiu said, tell me. Yi Xian said in a light voice, if I don't die today, then you're not allowed to make a move against me or the Talisman sect for a year. Not only that, you have to make a move against me twice. Zhang Wenxiu looked at Yi Xian. What if you die? Yi Xian said, if I die, I'll pay the price with my life. Isn't that enough? Zhang Wenxiu shook his head. How thick-skinned? Yi Xian said, don't think that you're at a disadvantage. You're definitely stronger than me, aren't you? Zhang Wenxiu said calmly, all right, I promise you. Yi Xian looked at Zhang Wenxiu. Can I trust you? Zhang Wenxiu asked in return, what do you think? Yi Xian nodded. I trust you. Zhang Wenxiu looked at Yi Xian. Why? Yi Xian said, because you're the Prophet's disciple. As far as I know, the Prophet hates it when the strong use their strength to bully the weak. You won't do something he hates. Zhang Wenxiu looked at Yi Xian and did not say anything. Yi Xian said again, to be honest, I don't trust you. I trust the Prophet. Because I trust his foresight. Zhang Wenxiu shook his head and smiled. You want to play these little tricks with me? But as you wish, I really won't do anything he dislikes. If you don't die today, I won't kill you for a year and I won't attack Fu Wenzong. I can still attack you twice. Of course, that's on the condition that you don't die. Yi Xian nodded. All right. With that, he quickened his pace. At this moment, Lian Qian's voice suddenly sounded in Yi Xian's mind. Are you going to look for the plain-dressed woman? She knew that among the people Yi Xian knew, only the plain-dressed woman could suppress Zhang Wenxiu. Yi Xian shook his head. The plain-dressed woman? He did not know where she was. The plain-dressed woman's whereabouts were a mystery. Yi Xian did not think too much about it and quickened his pace. As for Zhang Wenxiu, the corners of his lips curled up and a playful smile appeared on his face. About an hour later, Yi Xian brought Zhang Wenxiu to a piece of barren land. When they arrived, Lian Qian knew who Yi Xian was looking for. Zhang Wenxiu narrowed his eyes. Yi Xian looked into the distance. At the end of his vision he could see a pitch-black door. Behind the door there was an eerie aura. Azura hell. This time, the person he was looking for was none other than Yi Ling. In fact, he had wanted to look for Yi Ling for a long time, but he did not have the chance. Now he had no choice but to look for her. He did not want to seek protection from Yi Ling, but he wanted to see if Yi Ling was still his sister. If she was not, then it was not a bad thing to end his life here. Of course he still wanted to see her. Yi Ling. Scenes of the past appeared in Yi Xian's mind. At this time Zhang Wenxiu suddenly smiled and said, Azura hell. As she said this, she looked at Yi Xian. Don't tell me that the helper you found is this Azura Empress. Yi Xian looked into the distance and remained silent. Zhang Wenxiu smiled and said, As far as I know, this Azura Empress is an extremely heartless person. Why do you want her to help you? Yi Xian shook his head. No, I just wanted to come here and take a look. Zhang Wenxiu smiled. What do you want to see? To see the Azura Empress? Yi Xian nodded. I want to see her. As he said this, he looked at the door in the distance. In fact, he was at a loss. Was Yi Ling still the same Yi Ling? He was not sure. This was because the Yi Ling he saw in the four-dimensional universe was too strong. He was so strong that he felt unfamiliar. He did not know if Yi Ling was still the same Yi Ling. If it was not, he had never thought about this question before, but now he did. If he wasn't, then everything would be meaningless. His main purpose in coming to the five-dimensional universe was to find Yi Ling. At this time Zhang Wenxiu suddenly smiled and said, You are not an idiot. You must have a reason for coming here. I am curious why you think this Azura Empress will help you. Yi Xian did not speak, he just looked into the distance. Zhang Wenxiu also looked into the distance. There was no movement inside the door. Zhang Wenxiu smiled and said, I will give you 15 minutes. Yi Xian was silent. 15 minutes passed in the blink of an eye. When the time was up, Zhang Wenxiu suddenly smiled and said, It seems that our Azura Empress will not come out. As she said this, she looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian said softly, Do it. After saying this, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. He knew that Yi Ling must know that he was here, but she did not appear. This explained everything. He was not going to force anything. Zhang Wenxiu looked at the door in the distance. She shook her head and smiled. Then she looked at Yi Xian, who was very close to her, and said, It seems that you have lost this bet. Go. As she said this, she suddenly raised her right hand and a powerful force suddenly enveloped Yi Xian. However, at this time, a voice suddenly came from the side, Try and touch him. Chapter 897. Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes when he heard this voice, and he looked towards the distance. A young girl was walking over slowly from there. It was none other than Yi Ling. There were two old men behind Yi Ling who were like ghosts. At this moment Yi Ling wore a dark black dress and was barefoot. Her feet were floating in the air, and she emanated a ghastly aura. The Azura Empress, the last emperor in the world. The smile on Zhang Wenxiu's face gradually vanished as she gazed at Yi Ling. There were countless emperors in the world all those years ago. However, all of them instantly dimmed in comparison when the Azura Empress appeared. Moreover, no one dared to call themselves an emperor after her. Even she, Zhang Wenxiu, wasn't able to become an emperor during that era, because the world didn't acknowledge it. If one wanted to become an emperor, then one had to fight the Azura Empress first. Zhang Wenxiu glanced at Yi Xian. At this moment she was quite curious. She was curious about the relationship between Yi Xian and the Azura Empress. Meanwhile, Yi Ling walked over to Zhang Wenxiu and looked Zhang Wenxiu in the eyes. Fuck off. Fuck off. As soon as these words were spoken, the atmosphere in the surroundings instantly became tense. Zhang Wenxiu roared with laughter. She opened her right hand, and a bolt of lightning suddenly descended from the sky. In the next moment, the bolt of lightning fell into her hand. It was a lightning spear condensed from lightning. Zhang Wenxiu gazed at Yi Ling and roared with laughter, "Come, allow me, Zhang Wenxiu, to experience the strength of the Azura Empress." As soon as she finished speaking, she stabbed the lightning spear forward. As soon as the spear was stabbed forward, the space in an area of over 100 kilometers was suddenly filled with lightning. The lightning territory. At this moment Yi Xian was horrified, because he noticed that the lightning around him was madly destroying him. Yi Xian hurriedly activated the sword territory. He instantly felt much better once it appeared, but it still wasn't good. The lightning didn't take the initiative to attack him, but the aftershock from it was difficult for him to resist. So powerful. At this moment he finally realized how terrifying this woman's power was. This was not something that Lu Shidi and Lin Xiaoshu could compare to. The difference was too great. As if he'd thought of something, Yi Xian hurriedly gazed at Yi Ling. A lightning spear was stabbing towards Yi Ling. Moreover, the lightning in an area of over 100 kilometers had converged madly towards Yi Ling as well. This spear could really be said to be earth-shattering. In front of Zhang Wenxiu, Yi Ling was expressionless. When the lightning spear was half a zhang away from her, she suddenly opened her right hand and clenched it tightly. All things returned to silence. As her voice fell, a blood-red sickle suddenly flew out from her palm. Between heaven and earth, something was being torn apart. In the next moment, Yi Xian watched with astonishment as the lightning started to shatter apart layer by layer. In less than a breath of time, the lightning domain had collapsed, and the lightning spear in Zhang Wenxiu's hand had started to shatter inch by inch. Suddenly, Zhang Wenxiu roared with laughter, "Everything returns to silence. Come, take another spear strike from me." As soon as she finished speaking, she'd arrived in midair, and she looked down at Yi Ling from there. A spear had suddenly appeared in her grasp, and she grinned as she lightly swept it towards Yi Ling. Sky split. The spear flew out from Zhang Wenxiu's grasp. Everywhere it passed, the entire sky split apart. When looked at from afar, it seemed like a rift had been torn open in this expanse of the heavens and the earth. It was an extremely shocking sight. Moreover, a spear carried destructive force as it swept down from within that rift, and its target was Yi Ling. Yi Xian's expression instantly changed violently when he saw this force, and he practically instinctively flashed over to stand in front of Yi Ling. He stared fixedly at the spear, and at this moment, his expression was unprecedentedly solemn. This spear strike was truly very formidable. Even if he utilized the energy of his bloodline, he wouldn't be able to resist it. Yi Ling gazed silently at Yi Xian while standing behind Yi Xian. What's this fellow doing? On the other hand, the two old men behind her were hesitant to speak, and they gazed at Yi Xian. What's this fellow doing? Right at this moment, Yi Ling suddenly patted Yi Xian on the shoulder and spoke softly, "Allow me." Yi Xian was stunned when he heard Yi Ling, and then he gazed at Yi Ling. Yi Ling nodded, "Allow me." Yi Xian grinned. "All right." As he spoke, he retreated behind Yi Ling. Yi Ling looked at the spear that had already arrived above her head, and her expression was very calm. She opened her palm, and the blood-red scythe in her hand suddenly flew out, and the scythe silently slashed at the spear. A subtle tearing sound was suddenly heard, and immediately after, the spear in Zhang Wenxiu's hand split into two. The scythe's speed did not decrease, and it soared into the sky, slashing straight at Zhang Wenxiu. In the air, Zhang Wenxiu grinned. "Interesting, haha." As soon as she finished speaking, she slowly closed her eyes, and in an instant, the blood-red scythe below her slowed down. Below, Yi Ling's expression was calm, but the expressions of the two old men behind her changed drastically. One of the old men said in a deep voice, "Spear Soul Dimension. This woman is so powerful." Yi Xian looked at the old man who spoke and asked, "Senior, what is the Spear Soul Dimension?" The old man glanced at Yi Xian and then said, "It's that woman's spear has already surpassed this dimension, and she's not in this dimension either." Yi Xian asked again, "She's already surpassed the fifth dimension? In the sixth dimension?" The old man's mouth twitched and he did not say anything else. Yi Xian was speechless. At this moment, Lian Chen's voice suddenly sounded, "The dimension he mentioned is actually space. Space has thickness, and not only does it have thickness, there are also dimensions. The five-dimensional universe refers to the 5 dimensions of space here, and Zhang Wenxiu has already entered the second dimension. She attacked Yi Ling in the second dimension, so the speed of Yi Ling's scythe has slowed down. This is because this is suppression, dimensional suppression. And people in the second dimension have absolute suppression over people in the first dimension. Not only can Zhang Wenxiu enter the second dimension, but she can also fuse her spear Dao with it, so it can be said that this is very impressive. Yi Xian nodded, and as if thinking of something he asked again, "How can I enter the second dimension?" Lian Qian said, "There's no shortcut, you can only break it with force and you need to have a deep understanding of space. You can't do without either." Yi Xian asked again, "Which dimension does the plain-dressed woman belong to?" Lian Qian suddenly said angrily, "Shut up, you talker." Yi Xian was speechless. At this moment, the space in the distance suddenly trembled and Yi Xian quickly looked up. The space had become illusory, and the blood-red scythe had completely stopped. Yi Xian quickly looked at Yi Ling, and the space around Yi Ling was in a strange illusory state. Obviously, Zhang Wenxiu was suppressing her in the second dimension. Yi Xian was a little worried. At this moment, Yi Ling suddenly opened her palm, and the blood-red scythe in the sky suddenly appeared in her hand. She held the scythe and lightly slashed it in front of her. There was a soft tearing sound, and it was this slash that suddenly restored the space to normal, and in the sky, a bloody scar suddenly appeared on Zhang Wenxiu's face. In the sky, Zhang Wenxiu touched her face lightly and she looked down at Yu Lai. "As expected of the last empress of the human world, I'm convinced." As she said that, she looked at Yi Xian. "You win." With that, she turned and disappeared at the end of the horizon. Yi Xian hesitated and then asked, "Linger, how did you win?" "Linger?" The two old men behind Yi Ling had extremely strange expressions, and one of them was about to speak, but was stopped by the other. Yi Ling looked at Yi Xian and she just looked at Yi Xian without saying a word. Yi Xian said, "You're still Linger, right?" Yi Ling still remained silent. Yi Xian opened his palm, and a little wooden figure appeared in his hand. This little wooden figure looked exactly like Yi Ling. Yi Ling suddenly said, "Stand down." The two old men behind her silently retreated to the side. Yi Ling said, "Come with me." With that, she turned and walked towards the distance. Yi Xian hurriedly followed her, and in next to no time, the two of them passed through the door and entered the Azura Hell. As soon as they entered the Azura Hell, a ghastly aura assaulted their faces, and Yi Xian couldn't help but shiver. It was very ghastly. This place was the most ghastly place he had ever seen. Yi Ling led Yi Xian deeper into the Azura Hell. Along the way, Yi Xian discovered that there were experts in black armor standing all around. These people's auras were extremely powerful, much more powerful than the experts in the Worldwide Academy. When these people saw Yi Ling, they all knelt on one knee. On the way, Lian Qian suddenly said, "She's really strong." Yi Xian hurriedly asked, "Why do you say so?" Lian Qian said in a deep voice, "When she fought with Zhang Wenxiu, she didn't enter the second dimension, but used the first dimension to break Zhang Wenxiu's second dimension. This kind of strength is very terrifying, worthy of being the strongest great emperor in the fifth dimension." Yi Xian grinned. He was really happy that Yi Ling was strong, but he still felt a little disappointed. This was because Yi Ling didn't need his protection anymore. At this time, Lian Qian said, "Your sister's strength is probably enough to enter the third dimension. If that's true, then it's too heaven-defying." Yi Xian looked at Yi Ling, "Can you enter the third dimension?" Yi Ling nodded slightly. "Yes." Yi Xian was about to speak, but Yi Ling suddenly said softly, "Why did you come to the fifth dimension?" Yi Xian said, "To look for you." Yi Ling stopped and looked at Yi Xian. And then? Yi Xian walked in front of Yi Ling and looked at Yi Ling. "You're my sister, and I'm your brother." Yi Ling said softly, "What you care about is the old Yi Ling." Yi Xian suddenly grabbed Yi Ling's hand. Yi Ling didn't resist, but the guards around them looked at Yi Xian with unkind expressions. However, seeing that Yi Ling didn't resist, they didn't dare to say anything. Yi Xian looked at Yi Ling in front of him and said softly, "Are you not the old Yi Ling? Or have you forgotten everything in the past?" Yi Ling looked at Yi Xian. "Do you know who I am?" Yi Xian smiled. "You're my sister." Yi Ling looked at Yi Xian for a long time. All of a sudden, scenes of the past flashed across her mind. Gradually, tears welled up in her eyes. Chapter 898. Inside the prison pagoda, Lian Qian sighed softly. At this moment, she was certain that the Shura Empress was Yi Ling, or rather, Yi Ling was the Shura Empress. There was no such thing as a past life or present life. As for why the Shura Empress had turned into Yi Ling, she did not know. In front of Yi Xian, Yi Ling said softly, "Come with me." After saying that, she walked towards an underground entrance in the distance. Yi Xian followed. Soon Yi Ling led Yi Xian to a deep underground area. Deep in this area, Yi Xian saw pitch-black iron pillars around him. These iron pillars were entwined with blood-red chains, and in the middle of these iron pillars was a huge hole that was emitting black flames. In the surroundings there were also some experts in golden armor. Seeing Yi Ling, these experts all knelt on the ground. Yi Ling waved her jade-like hand lightly. "Rise?" The experts around her all stood up. Yi Ling looked at the huge hole and said softly, "That is the real hell." Yi Xian looked at the hole. Yi Ling said, "My duty is to guard this place, and now those old geezers down there are getting more and more restless, so I have to go down." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "You want me to go down with you?" Yi Ling did not say anything. At this moment, Lian Qian suddenly said, "Big brother, can't you have some self-awareness? Even she can only guard this place. Can you imagine how terrifying this place is? What can you do if you go down with him? Drag him down?" Yi Xian. At this moment Yi Ling suddenly said, "While I go down you can stay here. Under normal circumstances, no one will dare to come here to cause trouble for you." Yi Xian smiled awkwardly. So Yi Ling wanted him to come to this place to take refuge. Yi Xian said, "All right. However, if I'm here with you they..." As he spoke, he looked at the golden armored guards around him. He had to admit that these people were really strong. If these people went to the Worldwide Academy, they would definitely be able to sweep away the entire Worldwide Academy. Too powerful. Meanwhile, Yi Ling spoke abruptly, "They wouldn't dare to disrespect you while you're here. However, you can't ask them to leave as well." When she spoke up to here, she paused for a moment and said, "It's not impossible, but don't ask them to leave this place at will." Yi Xian asked, "Can I dispatch them?" Yi Ling nodded. "Don't mess around." Yi Xian smiled and said, "I won't." Yi Ling opened his palm and a black token appeared in front of Yi Xian. "This is the Azura Order. Seeing it is the same as seeing me." Yi Xian put away the Azura Order and looked down at the cave entrance. "Is it dangerous?" Yi Ling nodded. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he said softly, "Be careful." At this moment, a feeling of helplessness arose in his heart. He wanted to go down with Yi Ling, but things were different now. If he went down there, he would be a burden to Yi Ling. He would be a burden. As if she knew what Yi Xian was thinking, Yi Ling suddenly said softly, "You've done a lot for me in the past. Now," Yi Xian suddenly said, "You're my younger sister. I'm willing to do anything for you, and it's only right and proper." Yi Ling gazed at Yi Xian for a short while, and then she said softly, "Live well." As soon as she finished speaking, she entered the black hole. It didn't take long for a hysterical roar to resound from within. Yi Xian's expression became solemn when he saw this. "Miss Lian Qian, what kind of place is that?" Lian Qian said, "Azura Hell. It's a true hell. The previous Azura Lord looked for Master, and he hoped that Master would destroy that place. Master went down there, but for some reason he didn't do anything." At this point she paused and then continued, "There are many dangerous and unknown places in this world. In fact, the most dangerous places are the Void, the Boundless Dungeon, and the Land of Immortality. Those three places are really dangerous." Yi Xian said solemnly, "I don't know if she'll be in danger." Lian Qian said, "Don't worry. With her strength, it's very difficult for her to die. You have to work hard to improve your strength. Don't forget that woman only promised not to attack you for a year. Moreover, this woman's words are like farts most of the time. If she suddenly changes her mind one day and comes looking for you, and Yi Ling isn't here, then you can just wait for death." Zhang Wenxiu. Yi Xian nodded. He had to improve his strength as soon as possible. At this moment, two old men suddenly appeared in front of him. These two old men were the two old men who followed Yi Ling. Yi Xian looked at them. "Seniors, how should I address you?" One of the old men said, "Ah Tian." The other old man glanced at Yi Xian. "Ah Di. Heaven and earth." Yi Xian said, "Seniors, I'll be staying here for a period of time. Is there a problem?" Ah Tian shook his head. "No problem. Your master's relative, so you should stay here." Yi Xian said solemnly, "Seniors, this junior has something to ask." Atendo said, "Please speak." Yi Xian said, "Is Ling reincarnated?" Atian shook his head, "Not really. Because if she reincarnated, in theory she can't remember her past life, and it's not like she took over. As for why she became your sister, we don't know either. Only Master knows the reason." Yi Xian nodded, "Then I'll ask her when the time comes." Then he looked at the two old men. "Can I use the resources here?" The two old men were speechless. Yi Xian asked again, "You should be able to, right?" Atian nodded, "Yes. What are you going to use?" Yi Xian said solemnly, "Swords. I need some good swords." Tian nodded. Wait a moment. Then he turned and left. At this moment, Adi suddenly said, Master has never cared about anyone. You're the first. Yi Xian said, I'm her brother. Adi wanted to say something but stopped. Yi Xian smiled. Senior, are you trying to say that I'm too weak to be her brother? Adi glanced at Yi Xian and did not say anything. Obviously it was a tacit agreement. Yi Xian smiled. I'll work hard to become stronger. Adi nodded slightly. Sir, you're a genius. Among the younger generation there aren't many who are stronger than you. With your talent, your future is limitless. As for Yi Xian, the two of them did not have any other thoughts. Because Yi Xian was monstrous enough. Although Yi Xian's current strength was not particularly strong, one should not only look at the present, but also look at the future. At this moment, Tian suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. He opened his palm and 3 swords appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian looked at the 3 swords and said softly, It's time to increase my realm. With that, he picked up a sword and stabbed it into his abdomen. Tian and the old man were speechless. At the Worldwide Academy. After Zhang Wenxiu left the Shura land, she returned to the Worldwide Academy. When she saw Zhang Wenxiu, Lin Xiaoshu and the rest heaved a sigh of relief. Although this woman had a bad temper, the Worldwide Academy could not afford to lose her now. Right now, the Worldwide Academy needed a super strong person to guard it. Lin Xiaoshu looked at Zhang Wenxiu who had returned. Then Yi Xian, Zhang Wenxiu suddenly said, Scram. Lin Xiaoshu's expression froze. Zhang Wenxiu did not care about the crowd. She walked towards a large hall below. That was where the Worldwide Library was located. Soon, Zhang Wenxiu arrived in front of the Worldwide Library. The person guarding the front of the library was the old man. Seeing Zhang Wenxiu, the old man looked at Zhang Wenxiu. It's you? Zhang Wenxiu's face was expressionless. You're not dead yet. The old man said softly, I can still live for a few more years. Zhang Wenxiu looked behind the old man. Back then, it was this library that caused my academy to fall apart. As she spoke, a wisp of ridicule arose on the corners of her mouth. Teacher, oh teacher, when you were here, all those students were obedient like cats, yet as soon as you vanished, all of them impatiently wanted the treasures you left behind. If you were still here, wouldn't you be very disappointed? In fact, she no longer had any nostalgia for the Worldwide Academy. If this place was not founded by the Prophet, she would have personally destroyed the people of the Worldwide Academy. Back then, the Worldwide Academy could be said to be full of talents. Other than the 6 headmasters, there were 3 grand scholars and 2 great scholars. In addition, there were countless talents in the Worldwide Academy. These people could be said to be the most outstanding people in the 5 dimensions. However, with the departure of the Prophet, most people became greedy. Some people even did not want to look for the Prophet. This was also the reason why she left in the first place. Hearing Zhang Wenxiu's words, the old man said softly, People's hearts, human nature. Zhang Wenxiu said softly, You should have met that person. What do you think? The old man asked, That young man? Zhang Wenxiu nodded. The old man was silent for a moment. Very good. To be able to make Xiaota recognize him as his master, he must be extraordinary. At this point, he shook his head slightly and said, Actually, it would have been better to directly accept this person into the academy. Zhang Wenxiu said softly, This person is not fated with the academy. The old man sighed softly. Wenxiu, you've been outside for so many years. Have you found teacher's whereabouts? Zhang Wenxiu shook her head. Not at all. The old man said in a low voice, With teacher's character, he would not disappear for no reason. I think that his disappearance back then might have been due to an unexpected situation. Zhang Wenxiu squinted her eyes. What are you trying to say? The old man shook his head and did not speak. Zhang Wenxiu said softly, With teacher's strength, no one in the 5th dimension could hurt him back then. The old man said in a low voice, Then there is only one possibility. Zhang Wenxiu nodded. Then teacher disappeared on his own. With his personality, he definitely wouldn't leave without giving us an explanation. So, I'm guessing that he probably didn't expect himself to disappear. Speaking to there, she paused for a moment before continuing, Just what was teacher doing to make himself disappear? The old man suddenly said, I wonder if teacher has any news about him. Female teacher. Zhang Wenxiu glanced at the world-dimensional bookstore, then turned around and left. The old man suddenly said, What are your plans? Zhang Wenxiu stopped and said softly, Although I don't want to manage this broken academy, it was left behind by teacher. Before teacher returns, I have to look after it for him. The old man asked again, then Yi Xian, what are you going to do? Zhang Wenxiu was expressionless. This person is quite mysterious. Behind him is not only the mysterious woman in plain dress, but also the Shura Empress. Why do we have to become enemies with him? Are we too full? The old man said, so many people died in the academy. Zhang Wenxiu's eyes turned cold. They died because they were stupid. They deserved it. After saying this, she quickly disappeared into the distance. Chapter 899. Fu Wenzong. Inside the Rune Palace, all the Fu Wenzong powerhouses had gathered. Shen Xinghe's face was gloomy. The faces of all the Fu Wenzong powerhouses in the palace were unsightly. Zhang Wenxiu had appeared. Fu Wenzong was no stranger to this woman. She could be said to be the scariest person in the worldwide academy. This was because the prophet and the female teacher were reasonable, but this woman was not reasonable at all. Moreover, she was extremely powerful. If this woman came to Fu Wenzong would not be able to stop her. At this moment, Lu Yong suddenly said, Senior brother, don't worry too much. With that woman's temper, she hasn't come yet. I think she won't come. Shen Xinghe nodded. No matter what, we have to be careful of this person. As he said this, he looked at Lu Yong. Is there any news of Little Grandmaster? Lu Yong nodded. Little Grandmaster has contacted me. He is safe and sound. Don't worry. Hearing this, Shen Xinghe nodded slightly. That's good. As he said this, he looked into the distance and said softly, I'm afraid the five-dimensional universe will not be peaceful soon. We should not stick to the rules. Junior brother, follow me. As he said this, he turned around and walked into the depths of the palace. Lu Yong was silent for a moment before he followed. Azura Hell. At this moment, Yi Xian was sitting cross-legged on a stone block. His body exuded a powerful aura. Behind him were Tian and Adi. The two of them were Yi Xian's bodyguards. After about an hour, Yi Xian suddenly picked up a sword and stabbed it into his abdomen. Boom. A wave of pure energy spread out from his body. Behind Yi Xian, the two elders looked at each other. They had to admit that they were very curious about Yi Xian's cultivation method. Yi Xian's cultivation method was too unique. Eating swords? They had never seen such a cultivation technique before. Approximately 2 hours later, Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes. A powerful aura swept out from his body like a tidal wave. 2 streams of air were emitted from his body, one yin and one yang. Yin-yang realm. Yi Xian stood up and looked at his hands. Above the yin-yang realm was the life and death realm, and above the life and death realm was the heavenly fate realm. After the heavenly fate realm was karma, and finally reincarnation. To put it simply, his current realm was still on the low side. However, he did not dare to continue. His top priority now was to stabilize his realm. Meanwhile, Tian suddenly said, What cultivation technique is this? Yi Xian collected his thoughts and said with a smile, A senior taught me how to use the sword as my dantian. Tian said softly, Very special. Yi Xian smiled and did not say anything. The more he read, the more he found the cultivation method the woman in the plain dress had taught him dreadful. After devouring swords and cultivating a sword body, he was now immune to almost all swords. It could be said that even the executing heaven sword couldn't hurt him. With his current strength, he could even devour the executing heaven sword. Yi Xian looked into the distance and said softly, When will she come back? Tian said in a deep voice, I don't know. Yi Xian looked at Tian. Senior, what kind of existences are suppressed in the Azura Hell? Atendo said, Evil spirits, vengeful spirits, and some special existences. Yi Xian asked again, Is she in danger? Tian said in a deep voice, Master is extremely powerful. Those random things are no match for her. Yi Xian nodded slightly, I hope everything is fine. Tian was about to speak when his expression suddenly changed. Yi Xian and Adi looked at Tian. Tian said in a deep voice, I lost contact with Master. Lost contact? Yi Xian frowned, What do you mean? Tian said in a deep voice, When Master left, she kept in contact with me. But just now, that contact was suddenly cut off. Yi Xian frowned, Did something happen? Tian shook his head, I don't know. Yi Xian said, Let's try to contact her. Tian nodded and closed his eyes slowly. After a while, his expression became more and more unsightly. He looked at Yi Xian and shook his head, I can't contact her. Something has happened. Yi Xian didn't hesitate and turned to walk in the direction of the Azura Hell. Tian hurriedly stood in front of Yi Xian, What are you going to do? Yi Xian said in a deep voice, I'm going to look for her. Tian shook his head, with your strength it's too dangerous to go there. Moreover, if anything happens to Master it's not something you can solve. Bullshit. Yi Xian suddenly said angrily, am I very weak? Tian nodded honestly. Yi Xian took a deep breath and said, Senior, I apologize for my tone just now. But I'm still worried so I'm going there myself. Tian said in a low voice, calm down first. I'll go take a look myself. If anything happens I'll let you know. Yi Xian was about to speak when Lien Chen spoke abruptly, he's much stronger than you. Let him go take a look first. Yi Xian fell silent for a moment and then he nodded, Senior, be careful. Tian nodded slightly and then he turned around and left. Yi Xian slowly clenched his fists. Actually, he knew that Yi Ling was very strong but he was still very worried. At the side, Adi glanced at Yi Xian. Actually, you should take care of yourself. Yi Xian fell silent. Adi continued, I have no ill intentions. That Xiao Ta is with you and many people won't give up on you. If it weren't for you, even Master wouldn't have given up on this pagoda. Because there's something that Master wants in the Worldwide Academy. Yi Xian nodded, I know. In the four-dimensional universe, Yi Ling had almost taken the prison pagoda, but in the end Yi Ling had chosen not to do so. After coming to the five-dimensional universe, the prison pagoda had been taken away by someone. He already knew that it was Yi Ling who had taken it, and Yi Ling had returned it to him. At this moment, Adi said, the treasures left behind by the Prophet are something that even the 6 great experts would be tempted by, especially those who are unable to advance any further. The Prophet's study can be said to be their last hope. However, the only way to open the study is with the prison pagoda in your hands. So, those people won't let you go, so you better be mentally prepared. Yi Xian nodded, I know. Adi was about to speak but at this moment he also frowned. Yi Xian hurriedly said, what's the matter? Adi said in a low voice, I've lost contact with Tian. There's a problem. Yi Xian said in a low voice, something must have happened down there. Adi said, I'll go take a look. Yi Xian shook his head, no, I'll go. Adi looked at Yi Xian and Yi Xian said in a low voice, my concealment method is very special. As long as I don't attack others, it's very difficult for others to discover me. Adi wanted to say something but Yi Xian turned around and left. He was very fast and in the blink of an eye he disappeared into the distance. Adi sighed softly, this guy. He hesitated for a moment but in the end he chose not to follow. After a while Yi Xian arrived at the entrance of hell. Before he entered, Yi Xian felt danger. However, he did not hesitate and directly entered hell. As soon as he entered hell, a cold aura hit him in the face and it was bone-chilling. Not only that, but there were some ferocious-looking ghosts floating around him. These ghosts were staring at him and their gazes made him shudder. Yi Xian was a little afraid but soon he seemed to think of something and his eyes suddenly lit up. What were these things around him? They were ghosts. What kind of existence were ghosts? They were souls. Why should he be afraid of souls? At this moment, an evil spirit suddenly pounced at him from afar. Yi Xian took out the soul-suppressing sword and the soul-suppressing sword flew out. The evil spirit was instantly absorbed by the soul-suppressing sword, and it did not even have a chance to resist. At this time the evil spirits around him retreated, and their eyes were filled with fear. Obviously they were very afraid of the soul-suppressing sword in Yi Xian's hand. Meanwhile, the corner of Yi Xian's mouth lifted slightly. Originally, coming to this place was a little dangerous, but now it seemed that not only would there be no danger but there might also be a chance. The soul-suppressing sword, this sword could devour souls to evolve. Of course, his focus now was not to devour these evil spirits, but to find Yi Ling. Yi Xian glanced around and the next moment he disappeared. This time he directly escaped into the realm of emptiness. Although he had the soul-suppressing sword, he did not dare to underestimate this place. The moment he disappeared, a divine sense suddenly swept past his position. Yi Xian's expression suddenly became solemn. Someone had discovered him? However, at this time the divine sense disappeared again. Yi Xian looked into the distance and in his line of sight, there was a large number of endless ghosts floating around. Yi Xian frowned. What exactly is this place? Suddenly, a voice came from afar, and the ghosts in the surroundings suddenly turned around and pounced towards the distance. Yi Xian hurriedly flew over and in next to no time he saw a person and it was Tian. At this moment, Tian was surrounded by tens of thousands of evil spirits, and the person in the lead was a man in red clothes. This person was a soul body as well, and he held a blood-red sword in his hand, and his aura was extremely strong. At this moment, the man in red clothes suddenly turned around and looked at Yi Xian's position. Yi Xian's face sank. This fellow wouldn't have discovered me, right? At this moment, a powerful aura suddenly enveloped him. Yi Xian knew that the other party had discovered him. Yi Xian stopped concealing himself and walked out directly. As soon as he walked out, countless evil spirits pounced towards him. Yi Xian lit up the soul-suppressing sword, and the evil spirits instantly retreated like a receding tide. Yi Xian looked at the man in red clothes, and the man in red clothes grinned. Another one! Yi Xian walked towards the man in red clothes. What about her? The man in red clothes smiled. Are you talking about the Shura Empress? Yi Xian nodded. The man in red clothes smiled even more brilliantly. I'm telling you seriously, the Emperor of the Dead has awakened. She will die, and she will die miserably, ha! At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared, and when he reappeared, he was already in front of the man in red clothes. The man in red clothes raised his sword and stabbed. This sword was incomparably powerful, but Yi Xian did not dodge and let the sword stab into his abdomen. The man in red clothes was stunned. The soul-suppressing sword in Yi Xian's hand was placed in between the man's eyebrows. I'm telling you seriously, you will die, and you will die miserably, very miserably. As soon as he finished speaking, he stabbed, then pulled out, then stabbed, pulled out, stabbed, pulled out, stabbed again, and this cycle continued. Chapter 900. In the field, countless wraiths and evil spirits roared, but none dared to attack. They were afraid of Yi Xian's soul-suppressing sword. Just like that, the evil spirit in red was killed by Yi Xian. At the side, Atian looked at Yi Xian shocked. He knew the strength of the man in red. It was the man who held him back just now, but he did not expect Yi Xian to kill him with one strike. What kind of monster was this? Yi Xian looked at Atian. Senior, you go back first. Atian said, let's go back together. Master is so powerful, she will be fine. Yi Xian shook his head. I'm still worried. After that, he turned and looked into the distance. He could not see the end, and in this godforsaken place, evil spirits and evil spirits were everywhere. What kind of place was this? Yi Xian frowned slightly. Tendo said, I'll go with you. Yi Xian shook his head. No need, it's more convenient for me to go alone. Atian wanted to say something, but Yi Xian suddenly said, Senior, don't waste time. After that, he disappeared into the distance. Atian was silent for a moment, then turned and left. He also realized that he could not do anything here. Even if Yi Ling was in danger, he could not help. What could he do if even Yi Ling could not solve the danger? In the distance, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. He went into the land of emptiness again. Yi Xian thought, Miss Lian Chen, how did the man in red discover me? After a moment, Lian Chen said, the space you appeared in is a domain. Yi Xian's face darkened. Don't scare me. Lian Chen said, this is a domain, you are in someone else's domain. I advise you to leave while you can. In someone else's domain. Yi Xian looked around. Can you sense Dao Linger's position? Lian Chen said, are you sure you won't leave? Let me tell you, even if she's really in danger, it's not something you can handle. So, I think you should take care of yourself first. Yi Xian said solemnly, after coming to this place, I have a bad feeling. Lian Chen sighed softly. Let me tell you about this place. I might be one of the few people who know the history of this place. In the beginning, this place was just a battlefield. Later on, because more and more people died, the souls of those who died here gathered in this place. As time passed, more and more evil spirits and ghosts appeared here. However, at that time they weren't much of a threat. Until one day, a person suddenly appeared here. This person was the dead emperor that the red-clothed man mentioned. This person refined this place into hell, and the one who managed this place in the past was the Azura kingdom. He was also the ancestor of your little sister. When she spoke up to here, she paused for a moment and said, the dead emperor almost turned the entire Azura kingdom into hell. Unfortunately, he failed. Then he was suppressed in this place. The Azura royal family has been trying to kill this dead emperor for countless years, but to no avail. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, is the emperor of the dead very strong? Lian Chen said, very strong. In the past, the Azura lord invited Master to this place, hoping that Master could kill this dead emperor. However, for some unknown reason, Master didn't choose to do so. Yi Xian frowned. Is it because he didn't have the ability to kill it? Lian Chen said, impossible. Master definitely had the ability to kill this dead emperor, but he didn't. There must be some other reason. Also, you have to understand something. Yi Ling is so strong, but he still couldn't destroy this place. Think about it, can this place be simple? Really, this place isn't something you should come to at your current level. Go somewhere else to train. When your level increases, you can come here to try. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. I also want to do that, but Ling Er. As he spoke, he looked into the distance and said softly, I'm still worried. Lian Chen asked, what can you do? Yi Xian said softly, I don't want to wait outside and I don't want to regret it even if it means death. As he spoke, he disappeared on the spot. In the prison pagoda, Lian Chen sighed softly. She had to say this Yi Ling was Yi Xian's nemesis. As long as Yi Ling was involved, Yi Xian, who was usually very smart, would turn into an idiot. There was no saving him. Lian Chen shook her head and didn't say anything else. She knew that it was useless no matter what she said. Along the way, Yi Xian was very careful. Along the way he saw countless evil souls. Moreover, the deeper he went, the stronger the aura of these evil souls. In fact, he really wanted to take out the soul-suppressing sword and absorb all these evil souls. If he absorbed all the evil souls here, the soul-suppressing sword would definitely undergo a qualitative transformation. There were simply too many evil souls in this place. The soul-suppressing sword was also a little restless. However, he still didn't dare to do so. This place was not simple. If he did so, he might not even know how he died. Moreover, his goal this time was to find Yi Ling. Thinking of Yi Ling, Yi Xian began to speed up. About an hour later, Yi Xian found a city in the distance. The city was completely black and there were all kinds of evil souls floating around it. And in the sky above the city, Yi Xian saw Yi Ling. At this moment, Yi Ling was floating above the city. Around her floated 4 old men in black robes. The 4 old men held strange red hooks in their hands. And above Yi Ling's head, there was a huge black seal. This seal constantly emitted a black light that enveloped Yi Ling below. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, Miss Lian Chen, what is that thing? It looks very powerful. Can you hook it up? Lian Chen was speechless. At this moment, Yi Ling suddenly waved her right hand in the distance. A powerful force shook out from her sleeve. This force was like a tidal wave that shook the 4 old men around her. Seeing that Yi Ling suddenly made a move, the 4 old men hurriedly formed a hand seal and began to quickly chant. Soon, the huge black seal above Yi Ling's head suddenly trembled violently. Countless black lights swept down from the sky. These black lights directly drowned Yi Ling's power. Rumble. The entire sky began to tremble violently. The surrounding space violently undulated like a wave due to the 2 powerful forces. It was extremely terrifying. Yi Xian became nervous. Although he knew that Yi Ling was extremely powerful, he couldn't help but start to worry. In the sky, Yi Ling's face was expressionless. She raised her head to look at the huge black seal and said indifferently, the seal of life and death. You're quite capable. You actually activated this thing. At this moment, a middle-aged man appeared in front of Yi Ling. The middle-aged man was a soul body as well. He held a spear in his hand. He looked at Yi Ling and smiled, Shura Empress, you're even more powerful than before. Yi Ling looked at the middle-aged man and ridiculed, Chiyu, you finally dared to come out after hiding for so many years? The man called Chiyu smiled, Shura Empress, I lured you here today because I wanted to give you a big gift. Ah. Yi Ling slapped out with a backhand palm. A blood-red scythe suddenly flew out from her palm. As soon as the scythe appeared, heaven and earth were directly torn apart. Chiyu's expression changed slightly when he witnessed this scene. He didn't dare act carelessly, and he used all his strength to stab with the spear in his hand. The howl of a vicious soul suddenly resounded from the tip of the spear. Yi Xian shook his head. This man's spear technique is even worse than Zhang Wenxiu. In the sky, the spear had just come into contact with Yi Ling's scythe, and it was instantly torn apart. The scythe continued forward and slashed towards Chiyu. Chiyu's expression changed drastically when he witnessed this scene, and he hurriedly retreated. However, right at this moment, the huge black seal above Yi Ling suddenly trembled violently, and a powerful force directly suppressed Yi Ling's scythe. Yi Ling raised her head to look at the seal of life and death. She opened her palm, and the scythe appeared in her hand. In the next moment, she transformed into a ray of black light that shot into the sky, and she slashed her scythe at the seal of life and death. Rumble. The seal of life and death trembled violently, and then it cracked apart. Chiyu's expression changed drastically when he witnessed this scene, and he hurriedly said, "Attack!" The 4 black-robed old men hurriedly chanted a chant. In next to no time, the entire sky suddenly started to tremble violently, and then strands of mysterious energy swept incessantly towards Yi Ling. In midair, Yi Ling had an emotionless expression on her face as she suddenly stomped her right foot on the ground. Rumble. The space in an area of over 100 kilometers cracked apart, and countless vicious souls exploded apart at this moment. Their souls were obliterated, and the mysterious energy around her vanished without a trace at this moment. Yi Ling looked down, and then the scythe in her hand suddenly flew forward. One of the black-robed old men didn't even have the time to react before his head flew into the air. On the other hand, another old man was just about to flee, but his head had flown into the air without the slightest sign at the instant he fled. In less than a breath of time, all 4 black-robed old men had been killed by Yi Ling. Yi Ling gazed at Qiyu. She raised her hand and waved it, and then the scythe in her hand transformed into a ray of blood-red light that slashed towards Qiyu. However, not only did Qiyu not dodge, he smiled instead. Right when the scythe was around 1.5 m away from Qiyu, it suddenly stopped moving. In midair, Yi Ling's beautiful brows knit together slightly. Right at this moment, she seemed to have sensed something, and she swiftly turned around to look at Yi Xian. "Let's go." Yi Xian was just about to speak when Lian Qian's voice resounded in his mind. "Leave quickly. Don't hesitate." Yi Xian turned around instinctively and fled. However, at the instant that he fled, he sensed a formidable aura appear behind him. This aura wasn't targeted at him, and it was targeted at Yi Ling instead. Yi Xian turned around and glanced towards the distance. In the sky above Yi Ling, a pair of enormous eyes had suddenly appeared there, and they were scarlet red like an ocean of blood. The undead emperor. In midair, Yi Ling's eyes narrowed slightly. "Who unsealed you?" At this moment, a sea of blood suddenly seeped out from the sky, and then it spread towards Yi Ling. P.S. Some readers said that they were going to provide for me. Let me tell you, you're looking down on me. I, Green Wan, would rather starve to death than bow down to mere monthly votes. Chapter 901. In the distance, Yi Xian did not leave. Instead, he chose to conceal himself. He looked at Yi Ling in the sky, his fists clenched tightly. Within his body, his blood began to tremble. In the sky, Yi Ling looked at the sea of blood, her face expressionless. Her eyes suddenly turned white, and around her, a destructive power began to gather. When the sea of blood reached Yi Ling's head, Yi Ling suddenly clenched her fists. "Destroy." As soon as she finished speaking, a white light suddenly flew out from her eyes. This white light instantly covered the sea of blood. Rumble. The surrounding space began to crumble, as countless evil spirits retreated frantically. Yi Xian also retreated rapidly. After retreating for 1,000 zhang, Yi Xian finally stopped. Yi Xian looked up at the sky, and within the white light, there were sounds of tearing. Yi Xian became nervous. At this time, the white light in the sky suddenly disappeared. When it was all gone, Yi Xian saw Yi Ling. Yi Ling was wielding a blood scythe, looking like a god of death. In front of Yi Ling there was an illusory man. He wore a snow-white robe and held a white jade fan in his hand. He did not look like an undead emperor but more like a scholar. On his shoulder, there was a small beast the size of a palm. It was completely black with a pair of horns on its head, and its eyes were red. The undead emperor looked at Yi Ling and smiled. "You're even more outstanding than your ancestor." Yi Ling looked at the undead emperor. "Who broke the seal for you?" The undead emperor laughed. "Can't I break through it myself?" "No, it can't be considered breaking it now. It's just that there aren't as many restrictions as before." As he spoke, he looked at Yi Ling. "When the seal is truly broken, you won't be able to stop me." Yi Ling suddenly looked around. Soon, she narrowed her eyes and said, "You lured me down here to fight with your doppelganger so that you can use my power to weaken the seal here." The undead emperor smiled and said, "Yes." Yi Ling nodded slightly. "Good plan." The emperor of the dead laughed. "Descendant of the Azura clan, it seems like I will have to settle the score with your ancestors in the past." Yi Ling looked at the undead emperor. "Anytime." The undead emperor laughed as if he had discovered something. He suddenly looked at Yi Xian's position. When he saw Yi Xian, he smiled and said, "I've heard of you." "You've heard of me?" Yi Xian didn't hide anymore. He walked out and looked at the undead emperor. "Am I that famous now?" The undead emperor smiled and said, "I heard that the prophet Xiao Tai is with you." Yi Xian's face sank. So that's what the undead emperor was planning. The undead emperor suddenly smiled and said, "Please take care of it for me for now. When I come out, I will personally take it." As he spoke, his body gradually became illusory. Yi Xian suddenly asked, "Why didn't the prophet kill you back then?" "The prophet?" The undead emperor was slightly startled. He then shook his head and smiled. "That's a good question. The prophet indeed had the strength to kill me back then. He was also the only one who had the strength to completely destroy me. Unfortunately, he didn't do so." Yi Xian asked again, "Why?" The undead emperor smiled and said, "Because everything has a cause. Why did this place turn into hell? Why would there be? Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Temple. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue? From now on, Yi Xian's position as crown prince will be replaced by Yi Lang." The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind him, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the elders of the Yi clan. "What?" At this moment, a timid voice rang out in the ancestral temple. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yi Ling, Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian, she ignored her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral temple, and said timidly, "Great elder, my brother Yi Xian is a crown prince. Why did you discard him for no reason?" The great elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. "This is a matter of the clan, why are you interrupting?" Yi Ling was obviously afraid, not daring to look at the great elder, but she did not leave. Instead, she plucked up her courage and entered the ancestral temple. She bowed again to the elders on both sides. "Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan over the mining rights at Nanshan. He's fighting for the clan and we don't know if he's dead or alive. Yet, the clan is using a groundless excuse to discard his position. This is unfair. Impudent." The great elder suddenly raged. "Discard him or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this time, the new crown prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. "You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others." The great elder replied coldly, "Then flog her 30 times. Soon 2 guards of the Yi clan rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years. Even now he's fighting for the clan. The clan is so unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new crown prince Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, "Young master Yi Lang inherits the position of crown prince. What are you yelling about?" As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly swelled up. However, she did not cry. She only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard hurriedly bowed. "This subordinate, Zhang Mu, greets the crown prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the crown prince, I'll need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and hurriedly bowed deeply. "This subordinate is willing to go through fire and water for the crown prince." Yi Lang nodded slightly. "Drag him away. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Don't hold back. Understood?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang. When he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something and suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man wore a tight-fitting robe that was tattered and covered in blood. The young man was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a sinister smile. Inside the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes, his face dark and gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He hurriedly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian was like a ferocious tiger leaping in front of him. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. However, Yi Ling did not stop there. He charged at Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you?" Yi Xian suddenly stomped on Zhang Mu's chest. Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly. Yi Xian looked up at him and said, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked up to Yi Ling. Seeing Yi Ling's appearance, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed out. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue? From now on, Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the elders of the Yi clan. Why? At this time, a timid voice rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian from his position, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall, and said timidly, "Great elder, my brother Yi Xian is a prince. Why did you discard him for no reason?" The great elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. "This is a matter of the clan, why are you interrupting?" Yi Ling was obviously afraid, not daring to look at the great elder, but she did not leave. Instead, she plucked up her courage and entered the ancestral hall. She bowed again to the elders on both sides. "Elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan over the mining rights at Nanshan. He's fighting for the clan and we don't know if he's dead or alive. Yet, the clan is using a groundless excuse to discard his position. This is unfair. Impudent." The great elder suddenly raged. "Whether he discards his position or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this time, the new prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. "You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others." The great elder replied coldly, "Then flog her 30 times. Soon 2 guards of the Yi clan rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years. Even now he's fighting for the clan. The clan is so unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, "Young master Yi Lang inherits the title of prince. What are you yelling about?" As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly swelled up. However, she did not cry. She only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard hurriedly bowed. "Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the prince, I'll need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed. He hurriedly bowed deeply. "This subordinate will go through fire and water for the prince." Yi Lang nodded slightly. "Drag him away. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Don't show mercy. Understood?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang. When he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu suddenly stopped as if he had seen something. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe. The robe was tattered and covered in blood. The young man was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a sinister smile. Inside the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes, his face dark and gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He hurriedly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. However, Yi Ling did not stop there. He charged at Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, Yi Xian, he's my man. How dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Oh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly. Yi Xian looked up at him and said, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stepped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked up to Yi Ling. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being cut by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Pum. Chapter 902. Yi Xian understood when he heard Lian Xian's words. Everyone hoped that Yi Xian would fight to the death against the Worldwide Academy, and it would be best if the Worldwide Academy's trump card was revealed. That way, those people would be able to take advantage of the situation. Everyone was cunning. Yi Xian shook his head. Meanwhile, Lian Xian said, "All of you can't make a move now. They aren't in a hurry and all of you can't either. You have to hold your ground." Yi Xian nodded. "I understand. But there's a problem, and that's the dead emperor down there." Yi Ling suddenly said, "He can't come out for now." Yi Xian looked at Yi Ling. Time. Yi Ling said, "I can sense that the seal down there hasn't dissipated completely, but it can only last for 3 months at most." Yi Xian asked again, "Can you defeat him?" Yi Ling said, "I'll know after I fight him." Yi Xian fell silent. Meanwhile, Yi Ling said softly, "Don't worry too much." Yi Xian nodded. "Let's think of a way together." Yi Ling sized up Yi Xian and said, "You need to improve your strength." Yi Xian said, "I know." He could be said to have reached a bottleneck in improving his strength. Both his sword Dao and his cultivation had reached a bottleneck, and it was extremely difficult to improve further. Meanwhile, Yi Ling suddenly said, "I'm going into closed-door cultivation for some time. Try not to leave this place during this period." Yi Xian looked at Yi Ling. "You're going into closed-door cultivation?" Yi Ling nodded. "Don't leave this place rashly." Yi Xian nodded slightly. "All right." Yi Ling didn't say anything else and he just turned around and left. Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Miss Lian Qian, where's your eldest sister?" He remembered that Yan Jia and Yu had already gone to look for the big sister they spoke of. However, there was no news of her now. Lian Qian said, "I haven't received any news from them either. However, since Big Sis said she wants to see you, she'll definitely come looking for you." Yi Xian asked in a deep voice, "Is your elder sister strong?" Lian Qian nodded. "Similar to Zhang Wenxiu. Of course, our true strength lies in the gathering of all the Dao laws and cooperating with Xiaota. This is how we were able to escape from the 5th dimension. All the Dao laws were gathered." Yi Xian nodded. "I hope they can find me soon." Lian Qian said in a low voice, "There are 2 things you must do at the moment. The first is to improve your strength and the second is to see if you can contact that woman in a plain dress." A woman in a plain dress. Yi Xian was silent. He also wanted to find the plain-dressed woman. With her around, that undead emperor would be a big brother. However, he didn't know where the woman in the plain dress was. Lian Qian continued, "If you can't contact the woman in the plain dress, then you only have one way to go, and that is to improve your strength. Also, don't forget your talisman Dao. If you can draw a perfect 7-colored talisman, it'll be very terrifying. You should know that in the past, Fu Wenzong and Fu Xiaotian relied on their talismans to look down on the world." Yi Xian said, "Is the 7-colored talisman really that strong?" Lian Qian said, "The 7-colored talisman in your hand isn't a perfect 7-colored talisman. Moreover, you haven't been able to fully display its power. If you can perfectly display its power, you'll definitely be able to rely on it to fight against experts of Lu Shidi's level." Yi Xian thought about it and said, "I'll make a trip back to Fu Wenzong." With that, he turned around and left. In the depths of hell, in the black ancient city, in a black hall, a coffin was placed in the middle of the hall. Inside the coffin was the undead emperor. Not far away from the coffin stood a woman. The woman wore a long red dress, her hair long enough to touch the ground. She had her back to the coffin, her right hand gently stroking her hair. After a while, the undead emperor suddenly said, "The Shura Empress is stronger than the previous Shura country lord." The corner of the woman's mouth curled up into a horrifying smile. "What, are you afraid?" The undead emperor smiled. "Apart from the prophet, when have I ever been afraid of anyone?" "The prophet?" After a moment of silence, the woman smiled and said softly, "The prophet, is really an amazing person. The undead emperor said, he personally suppressed the devouring spirit clan. Don't you hate him? The woman smiled, do you hate him? The undead emperor was silent for a moment, then said, no. The woman smiled and asked, why? The undead emperor said softly, back then he had the strength to destroy me in this place but he didn't. Instead he tried his best to help us here. At that time, I also promised him that if he could really help the evil spirits of this place, I would let go of all my hatred and not bring disaster to this world. Unfortunately he left and never returned. Later I found out that he disappeared. After saying that he paused then said, a person as powerful as he is, no one can kill him. The woman smiled and said, according to our investigation he should not have been killed by someone. He disappeared on his own. The undead emperor said in a deep voice, do you know where he is now? The woman shook her head, I don't know. As for whether he will appear in the future, no one knows. The undead emperor said, what do you want? The woman smiled, what do you think? The undead emperor said, although the prophet is no longer here, the outside world is not as weak as you think. The woman suddenly counted with her fingers, let me count. Shura Empress, female teacher, old tomb keeper, Limubai human snow, and the crippled woman who has disappeared for a long time. There should only be these 6 people who can threaten the devouring spirit clan. The undead emperor said, why do you have a way to deal with these 6 people? The woman smiled, slowly we will start with this Shura Empress. After saying that she walked outside. Behind her, the undead emperor suddenly said, be careful of that Yi Xian. Yi Xian. The woman suddenly said, he is not the one who should be careful, but the swordsman behind him. We still don't know how strong she is. The undead emperor asked, why? The woman in red said, because she kills everyone with a single strike. The undead emperor said, in the 4th dimension? The woman in red shook her head, although it is in the 4th dimension, we cannot underestimate her. My clan values this woman very much. However, she did not come to the 5th dimension and is still wandering in the 4th dimension. Therefore we do not have much conflict with her, and we do not plan to provoke her. After saying that she looked up at the sky and said softly, at most 3 months, your seal will be completely erased. That will be the day of your battle with the Shura Empress. Don't worry, our people will help you. The undead emperor smiled, I can kill her. The woman in red asked, 100% sure? The undead emperor was silent. The woman in red smiled, we want 100% sure, no accidents can happen. After saying that, she turned and disappeared into the distance. Inside the palace, the coffin began to tremble and around it something seemed to be disappearing bit by bit. Fu Wenzong. After Yi Xian returned to Fu Wenzong, he went into seclusion to draw runes. Target, 7-color runes. All the elders of Fu Wenzong and Xin Xinghe surrounded Yi Xian, guiding Yi Xian. Right now Yi Xian was Fu Wenzong's hope. This was recognized by everyone in Fu Wenzong. Drawing a 7-color rune was not easy at all, because one had to control the 7 elements and integrate them into the rune. Among the talismans, this could be said to be as difficult as ascending to the heavens. When the entire rune sect learned that Yi Xian wanted to draw a 7-colored talisman, the entire rune sect began to teach Yi Xian about it. Yi Xian did not start at the beginning, but learned all kinds of knowledge. During the time Yi Xian was learning, the 5th dimension was very peaceful, and the worldwide academy did not come to cause trouble for Fu Wenzong. Everything seemed to have returned to normal. In the 4th dimension. At this moment, inside the main hall of Tianjiang City, Shengguan Xian'er and Jiang Jiu were busy with all kinds of government affairs. However, this time, it was not only the 2 of them, there were also a few women, all of whom were their trusted aides. At this moment, an old man suddenly appeared at the entrance of the main hall. As soon as this old man appeared, many experts suddenly appeared around him. At this time, Jiang Jiu suddenly waved his hand, and the northern experts immediately retreated. The old man looked at Jiang Jiu and the women, smiling slightly. 2 young ladies, I am Fu Wenzong Elder Li Qi, under the order of the young master, I am here to take you 2 to the 5th dimension. To the 5th dimension. Hearing this, the 2 women were stunned. At this time, Jiang Jiu suddenly looked at Shengguan Xian'er, smiling. I said he will not forget us, why are you still worried? Shengguan Xian'er's small face turned red. Little Jiu, you understand him. Jiang Jiu shook his head and smiled. Actually, you know him better than I do, but you are anxious and can't keep your cool. Shengguan Xian'er smiled. Indeed, I have lost my composure recently. Jiang Jiu looked at Li Qi. Senior Li, we have to deal with the northern region's matters. It won't take too long, just 3 days, is that okay? Li Qi smiled, of course. Jiang Jiu nodded, looking at Shangguan Xian'er. Gather all the major forces and elect a new alliance leader. Shangguan Xian'er said in a deep voice, do we want to give up here? Jiang Jiu smiled, it's not giving up, it's just that we have to free up our hands. Moreover, if we continue to manage it like this after a long time, there will be problems. Shangguan Xian'er nodded, that's true, but I am still a bit reluctant to leave this place. Jiang Jiu said, then you will stay here? Shangguan Xian'er hurriedly shook her head, I still want to see the fifth dimension, and he sent people to pick us up. There must be something he wants us to do. Besides, the two of us are free tools. Jiang Jiu smiled, then we will ask him for some benefits. The corners of Shangguan Xian'er's mouth curled up slightly, all right. In next to no time, the two of them started to deal with the northern region's matters. Many powers in the northern region tried to persuade them to stay, but they only stayed symbolically. Because many people hoped that the two of them would leave, because if the two of them didn't leave, then they wouldn't have a chance to take over. After they finished dealing with the northern region's matters, the two of them followed Li Qi to the fifth dimension. For the sake of ensuring their safety, Fu Wenzong had even sent over 10 experts to escort them in secret. However, right when they had just left the fourth dimension and arrived at the fifth dimension, a woman in a red dress suddenly appeared in front of them. Li Qi's expression changed greatly when he saw this woman. Who are you? The woman in a red dress smiled lightly, and then she glanced at Jiang Jiu and Shangguan Xian'er before she said, I would like to invite the two of you over as guests. I wonder if the two of you can give me some face? Jiang Jiu looked at the woman in a red dress, and after a short moment she said in a light voice, all right, but they have to be kept alive. As she spoke, she paused for a moment and said, please let them be kept alive. The corners of the woman in a red dress curled up slightly, no. As she spoke, she was about to attack, but right at this moment, a voice suddenly came from the side, these people, I will protect them. The woman in a red dress turned around and looked over, and there, a woman riding a pig was slowly coming over. P.S. Tonsillitis caused by a cold, sore throat, dizzy head swelling. Yesterday afternoon, my fever reached 40 degrees, really uncomfortable. Everyone, please take care of your health. Chapter 903. The girl was riding on a small white pig. The pig was very white and fat, and it trembled as it walked. On the girl's shoulder was a large saber, and there was an evil smile on her face. She looked somewhat cynical. Jiang Jiu and Shangguan Xian'er looked at each other, and there was a trace of doubt in their eyes. Obviously they did not know this pig-riding girl. The girl in the red dress sized up the pig-riding girl and said with a smile, how should I address you? The pig-riding girl grinned, you guess? The girl in the red dress smiled, you guess if I guess or not? The pig-riding girl smiled, I guess if you guess or not. After saying that, she suddenly rushed out. The saber arrived. The girl in the red dress stood in the same place, and her expression was calm. She opened her palm, and a dim light flew out from her palm. Boom! The dim light directly shattered, and the saber fell to the ground, but the girl in the red dress had already appeared several hundred feet away. At this time, the pig-riding girl suddenly swung her saber. In the field, a tearing sound suddenly rang out. In the distance, the girl in the red dress put her hands together, and then gently pulled them to both sides. In an instant, a dim light shield appeared in front of her, and at this time the saber arrived. Boom! The dim light shield directly exploded, but the girl in the red dress had already retreated more than 100 feet away. The pig-riding girl waved her right hand, and the large saber flew back into her hand. In the distance, the girl in the red dress stared at her. Who are you? The pig-riding girl grinned, you guess again. The girl in the red dress smiled. It seems that this little four-dimensional universe is really full of crouching tigers and hidden dragons. Interesting. After saying that, she had already disappeared. In the same place, Jiang Jiu looked at the pig-riding girl. Senior is? The pig-riding girl smiled. Let's go. After saying that, she slowly rode her pig riding away, and as she walked she hummed, Big sister told me to patrol the mountain. In the same place, Jiang Jiu was silent for a moment and said, let's go. Soon the group disappeared at the end of the horizon. Fu Wenzong. During this period of time, Yi Xian had been crazily learning all kinds of knowledge, and Fu Wenzong could be said to have given his all for him. After studying for about a month, Yi Xian finally started writing. In fact, drawing runes, especially 7-colored talismans, required a lot of equipment and tools. However, Yi Xian didn't need to worry about these things, because Fu Wenzong had prepared everything for him. Apart from that, when he was drawing the 7-colored talisman, he had 6 super rune masters by his side to guide him. Of course, whether he could succeed or not depended on himself. They all failed at the very beginning. This was because fusing the 7 different types of energy together was truly too difficult. However, Yi Xian did not give up. About a month later, Yi Xian suddenly left the hall. At this time, Shen Xinghe walked to his side and said with a smile, "Little Grand Master, don't be discouraged." Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. "I'm not discouraged. It's just that I feel a little restless after so many failures." Shen Xinghe laughed. "You're already very calm. In the past, I also encountered a similar situation. At that time, I was really restless, so I was put in seclusion by my master for a full half a year." Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "This 7-colored talisman is really too difficult to draw. I can't make even the slightest mistake." Shen Xinghe smiled. "It's normal. If 7-colored talisman is so easy to draw, I, Fu Wenzong, would have already dominated the 5th dimension." Then he lightly patted Yi Xian's shoulder. "Don't be discouraged. Failure isn't scary. What's scary is the fear of failure." Yi Xian smiled. "I'm not afraid of failure." Qingqing Yi Family Ancestral Temple. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue? From now on, Yi Xian's position as crown prince will be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man wearing a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the Yi family's elders. What? At this time, a timid voice suddenly resounded in the ancestral temple. Everyone looked over and saw a little girl standing at the door. The little girl was about 12 or 13 years old. Her 2 small hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face was sickly pale, looking somewhat weak, and there was a trace of timidity in her eyes. This little girl was called Yi Ling, Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the family wanted to remove Yi Xian, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yi Ling slightly bowed to the people in the ancestral temple and timidly said, "Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is a crown prince. Why did you waste him for no reason?" The Great Elder coldly looked at Yi Ling. "This is a family matter, why are you interrupting?" Yi Ling was obviously afraid, not daring to look at the Great Elder. However, she did not leave. Instead, she plucked up her courage and entered the ancestral temple. Once again she bowed to the elders. "Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li family for the rights to the mine. He is fighting for the family and his life is uncertain. But the family is using a groundless excuse to remove him from the crown prince position. This is really unfair." Impudent. The Great Elder suddenly raged. "Whether he is removed or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this time, the new crown prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. "You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others." The Great Elder coldly replied, "Then flog him 30 times. Very quickly, 2 Yi family's guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and angrily said, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the family for so many years, and even now he is fighting for the family. The family is unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new crown prince Yi Lang. He knew that his chance to shine had come. The guard sneered, "Young Master Yi Lang inherits the crown prince's position, and it's everyone's wish. What are you shouting for?" As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly turned red and swollen. However, she did not cry and only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard hurriedly bowed. "This subordinate, Zhang Mu, greets the crown prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the crown prince, I need 10 personal guards. From now on, you can be my personal guard." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and hurriedly bowed deeply. "This subordinate is willing to go through fire and water for the crown prince, and I'm willing to die 1,000 deaths." Yi Lang nodded. "Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Do not hold back. Understood?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the killing intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this time, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something and he suddenly stopped. Within the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. He was dressed in a tight-fitting robe that was tattered and covered in blood. This person was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from the Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a cold smile. Within the ancestral hall, all the elders were frowning. The great elder narrowed his eyes and his face was dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak, when Yi Xian suddenly leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. Yi Lang did not stop there and he charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you?" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Oh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stomped down on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, tears welled up in her eyes. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue? From now on Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides there were the elders of the Yi clan. What? Right at this moment, a slightly timid voice suddenly resounded within the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that Yi Xian was to be replaced, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The girl called Yi Ling bowed to everyone in the hall as she asked timidly, "Great elder, my brother Yi Xian is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason?" The great elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. "This is a matter of the clan, what are you interrupting for?" Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the great elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, "Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family, and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince." Impudent. The great elder suddenly raged. "Whether he's crippled or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this time the new prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. "He should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others." The great elder replied coldly, "Then flog him 30 times. Very quickly 2 Yi clan's guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years and even now he's fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, "Young master Yi Lang inherits the title of prince. What are you shouting about?" As he spoke he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly turned red and swollen. However, she did not cry and only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard quickly bowed. "This subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the prince I'll need 10 guards. From now on you'll be my guard." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and quickly bowed deeply. "This subordinate will go through fire and water for the prince and I'll do anything for you." Yi Lang nodded. "Drag him away. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Don't hold back, understand?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu suddenly stopped as if he had seen something. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe that was tattered, and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a cold smile. In the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder squinted his eyes and his face was dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Zhang Mu felt dizzy and he stumbled and fell. Yi Lang did not stop there and rushed towards Zhang Mu again. At this time Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you!" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Pum. Chapter 904. Yi Xian was quite surprised as well. Because he hadn't expected that Li Mubai from Immortal Banished City would actually come to congratulate him. Yi Xian gazed at Shen Xinghe and the latter chuckled, "Don't be surprised, it's just normal." Yi Xian was puzzled, "Why is that?" Shen Xinghe smiled, "Because even the 6 great experts attach importance to a divine talisman master. Even though your current strength isn't sufficient to go against them, they wouldn't dare look down upon you. You'll be able to experience the influence and terrifying strength of a divine talisman master very soon." Lu Yong nodded slightly, "Yes, so long as you're willing, then you'll have countless friends." Yi Xian smiled, "Is it that popular?" Lu Yong smiled, "It is. Especially when you're still so young and your future is limitless. Let's not talk about all of that for now. Let's go meet this ambassador from Immortal Banished City. We can't neglect this place." As he spoke, he gazed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled, "All right." As soon as he finished speaking, the 3 of them walked towards Fu Wenzong's guest hall. It didn't take long for them to arrive at the guest hall. Meanwhile, a young man walked over with a smile on his face. The young man's gaze descended onto Yi Xian and he smiled, "I presume your brother Yi." Yi Xian nodded, "I'm Yi Xian. May I know who you are?" The young man smiled, "Li Shijuan." Shen Xinghe's voice suddenly resounded within Yi Xian's mind. The junior city governor of Immortal Banished City, Li Mubai, is his uncle. Yi Xian grinned, "So it's Brother Li, please sit." Li Shijuan smiled, "Brother Yi, you're a straightforward person, so I won't beat around the bush. I've come this time to ask for a favor." "A favor?" Yi Xian smiled, "May I know what it is?" Li Shijuan said, "I want to ask Brother Yi for a perfect 7-colored talisman." Yi Xian picked up the teacup in front of him and took a sip without saying anything. Li Shijuan added, "To tell you the truth, Uncle wanted it." Yi Xian smiled. "So it's Senior Li who wants it?" Li Shijuan nodded. "Yes." Yi Xian smiled but said nothing. Li Shijuan smiled and said, "Brother Yi?" Yi Xian suddenly said, "Brother Li, I'm sorry, I'm busy." The smile on Li Shijuan's face gradually vanished. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly stood up and said with a smile, "Brother Li, I still have something to do, so forgive me for not accompanying you." With that, he turned around and left. "Brother Yi." Right at this moment, Li Shijuan suddenly smiled and said, "Uncle wants it." Although it was still the same sentence, the meaning was completely different. Yi Xian turned around to look at Li Shijuan and said with a smile, "Brother Li, are you threatening me?" Li Shijuan smiled and said, "Of course not. It's just that, Brother Yi, it's better to have a friend than an enemy. What do you think?" Yi Xian nodded. "What you said makes a lot of sense. But Brother Li, do you think that a 7-colored talisman is very easy to craft?" Li Shijuan was just about to speak when Yi Xian said, Besides that, Brother Li, you have to understand something. You've been constantly emphasizing that it's what your uncle wants. What? In your opinion, it's a great honor for me, Yi Xian, that your uncle wants me to craft a 7-colored talisman? Li Shijuan gazed at Yi Xian and didn't say anything. Yi Xian smiled and said, your uncle is an expert of the current age and he's very formidable. However, I, Yi Xian, don't want to curry favor with him. As he spoke, he looked at Lu Yong. Elder Lu, send this distinguished guest from Immortal Banished City off for me. After saying that, he quickly disappeared into the distance. In fact, he also wanted to befriend Immortal Banished City, but Li Mubai didn't have the slightest sincerity. In addition, Li Shijuan's attitude might seem respectful on the surface, but he was very arrogant in his bones. He thought that he was looking for Yi Xian. Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent and no virtue. From this moment on, Yi Xian's position as crown prince will be removed and Yi Lang will succeed him. The speaker was an old man dressed in a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the Yi clan's elders. Why? At this moment, a somewhat timid voice suddenly rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This little girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian from his position, she rushed over despite her illness. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to everyone in the ancestral hall and said timidly, Grand Elder, my brother Yi Xian is the crown prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason? The Grand Elder looked coldly at Yi Ling. This is a matter of the clan. What are you interrupting for? Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the Great Elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family, and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince. Impudent. The Grand Elder suddenly raged, whether he's crippled or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this time, the new crown prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. He should be flogged 30 times as a warning. The Grand Elder replied coldly, then flog him 30 times. Very quickly, 2 Yi clan's guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, this is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years. Even now he's fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new crown prince Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, young master Yi Lang inherits the title of crown prince. What are you yelling about? As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly swelled up. However, she did not cry. She only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled, what's your name? The guard hurriedly bowed, this subordinate Zhang Mu greets the crown prince. Yi Lang nodded, you're not bad. After I become the crown prince I'll need 10 guards. From now on you'll be my guard. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and hurriedly bowed deeply, this subordinate will go through fire and water for the crown prince. I'll risk my life for you. Yi Lang nodded, drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Do not hold back. Understood? Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the killing intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this time, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something and he suddenly stopped. Inside the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside the hall. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. He was wearing a tight-fitting robe that was tattered and covered in blood. This person was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from the Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a cold smile. Within the ancestral hall, all the elders were frowning. The great elder narrowed his eyes and his face was dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. Yilang did not stop there. He charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time Yilang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man. How dare you?" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yilang's face turned ugly. Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yiling's side. Seeing Yiling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced apart. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yiling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue? From now on Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides there were the elders of the Yi clan. Why? Right at this moment, a slightly timid voice suddenly resounded within the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This little girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian, she rushed over despite her illness. The old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to everyone in the hall as she asked timidly, "Great elder, my brother Yi Xian is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason?" The great elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. "This is a matter of the clan, why are you butting in?" Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the great elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, "Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family, and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince." Impudent. The great elder suddenly raged. "Whether he's crippled or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this time, the new prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. "He should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others." The great elder replied coldly, "Then flog him 30 times. Very quickly, 2 Yi clan's guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years and even now he's fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, "Young master Yi Lang inherits the title of prince. What are you shouting about?" As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly turned red and swollen. However, she did not cry and only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard hurriedly bowed. "Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the crown prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the prince, I need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and quickly bowed deeply. "I'll go through fire and water for the prince and I'll do anything for you." Yi Lang nodded. "Drag him away. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Don't hold back, understand?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu suddenly stopped as if he had seen something. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe that was tattered, and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a cold smile. In the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes and his face was dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. Yi Lang did not stop there and charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you?" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.